Chapter 209. Nai Gong thought that he had seen through the weakness of the Ming army. Thus, he gathered 3,000 cavalrymen and had them charge out from the front. 3,000 Walla cavalrymen surged forward. From afar, they looked intimidating. At the very least, the Ming army led by Tao Jin and Gao Li trembled in fear. However, Tang Shan, who did not care about all this, had the opposite expression. His eyes were wide open as he looked forward. He waited for the enemy to enter the predetermined distance before he started shooting. Without needing anyone to give the order, all the Lang Feng soldiers started firing when they estimated that the enemy cavalry had entered their effective shooting range. Similarly, a dense net of fire enveloped the front. The cold vanguard soldiers guarding the center even switched their guns to burst mode. Often, a small group of cavalry would fall to the ground together with their horses after a burst of bullets. Naturally, this method of fighting could not kill one person with one shot. However, it had an absolute deterrent effect and disrupted the charging formation of the enemy cavalry. Under the dense gunfire, at least 1,000 Walla cavalrymen were killed in the charging path. However, this also bought them a distance of more than 100 steps. Just as they were getting closer and closer to the Lang Feng soldiers and were less than 40 steps away, grenades rained down on them like rain. Then, a series of deafening sounds rang out. Following that, people shouted and horses neighed non-stop. A series of powerful grenades were thrown and completely shattered the enemy's fighting spirit. At the same time, countless people died. Those who were still alive immediately retreated. They no longer had the courage to charge. Phew! Tao Jin and Gao Li let out a long sigh. It had to be said that their performance just now was a little too weak. When they saw the enemy rushing in front of them, they actually forgot that they were still holding strong bows in their hands and could only watch helplessly as the enemy got closer and closer. Their legs began to go soft and their bodies began to tremble. It could be imagined that if the Lang Feng soldiers were not the main force in this battle, these 2,000 Ming soldiers would have been defeated. If they were not captured, they would have been killed. It could be said that these Ming soldiers had not received proper training for too long. They had forgotten what the battlefield was like. They had forgotten that a life-and-death battle relied on courage. Fortunately, the Lang Feng made a move at the crucial moment. He used the powerful grenades to destroy the enemy's morale and won another victory. Another attack had failed. The old man in the town was not discouraged. Instead, he patted his head as if he had suddenly realized something. "Aya, it's all my fault. It turns out that the Ming army's main force is right in front. It seems like their weak point is behind us. Come on, gather the rest of the troops and charge out with me." After knowing that it was impossible to attack from the front, Nai Gong immediately changed his strategy and decided to leave the town from the west. He thought that he was very adaptable, but in fact, he was just adding fuel to the fire. However, as the person in the game, Nai Gong had no idea. With the order, the remaining 6,000 Walla cavalrymen quickly gathered. However, because the path out of the city was not wide enough, only 1,000 cavalrymen could charge out at a time. As the leading general, Nai Gong took the initiative to stand in the third echelon, which was the third group to charge out. In Nai Gong's eyes, standing here was undoubtedly very safe. Once the first two factions had used up all their firearms, it would be time for him to go on a killing spree and show off his might. However, would that really be the case? Xiao Feng, along with Xianxia and Mao Fushou's 2,000 Ming soldiers, was destined to teach Nai Gong a lesson. Everyone, be careful. In a moment, the Walla cavalry might charge out from the west. At that time, we will attack when they are 300 steps away. Before that, I hope that Commander Yang and Commander Mao can play your roles. Lie in ambush on the two sides and shoot from afar. Don't worry about whether you can hit the enemy or not. Just shoot with the fastest speed and immediately retreat. Do you understand? Xiao Feng looked at the two commanders of the Ming army and used an unquestionable tone to give the order. Although they were not affiliated with each other, Yang Jie and Mao Fushou had seen how Xiao Feng had led the Cold Front Company into Willow Town and killed hundreds of Walla cavalry. In the army, the strong were always respected. With the scene just now, Xiao Feng's words naturally had more credibility. Furthermore, he was not asking them to go up and die. Why would they not agree? At that moment, the two of them expressed their agreement and quickly began to make preparations. They had made arrangements in advance. Just as the 2,000 Ming army went to the west of Willow Town, a large number of Walla army appeared. Release the arrows, release the arrows. After releasing the arrows, immediately retreat. When Xianxia and Mao Fusho saw that the Walla cavalry had charged into the range of the bows, they loudly gave the order. Immediately, arrows rained down from the sky and landed on the Walla cavalry that was charging out of the town. The dense barrage of arrows rained down, and hundreds of Vala cavalry were shot down. They fell from their horses, causing waves of chaos. However, even more cavalry charged out and headed straight for Xiao Feng, who was guarding the front. Attack! Xiao Feng, who was also holding the 95 style, had an excited expression on his face. He was the first to raise his gun and shoot, hitting a Walla cavalry that was charging over with a sword. This was like a signal that instantly pulled the attention of all the Cold Front Company soldiers. At that moment, hundreds of guns were fired at the same time. Bullets flew out from the muzzles and flew towards the charging enemy, and the war horses that were relatively larger in size. Ha ha ha! Do you see, the Ming army here is indeed few in number. Follow me and charge. When he saw that the bows were flying all over the sky, but in reality, they were not very accurate and their accuracy was greatly reduced, the leading Wei Gong thought that he had seen through the Ming army. He was immediately overjoyed and urged the army to quickly move forward. Just as the order was given, the second echelon of 1,000 Walla cavalry charged out, and there was a burst of firecrackers in front of them. From afar, they could not see the situation in front of them clearly. They could only see streaks of fire that were like meteors flashing by. It was because they could not see the situation in front of them that the Walla cavalry at the back continued to charge forward, one after another, towards hell. The sound of the gunshots traveled very far. Around 15 li behind Wei Gong, they could faintly see the scene of red light flashing in the distance. Luckily, this was a plain. If there was a forest in the way, it would be difficult to see the scene in the distance. The Ming army actually came out of the city to fight? Looking at the red sky in front of him, Borromeo quickly made a judgment and guessed that Wei Gong had encountered the Ming army. Based on the time that they set off, he did not think that Wei Gong would be able to reach the capital so quickly. Thus, there could only be one conclusion, and that was that the Ming army took the initiative to come out of the city. They wanted to catch them off guard. In the art of war, there was the saying of taking the enemy by surprise. However, the Walla were mostly cavalry. In a battle on a plain, their advantage was too great. The Ming army did not know this, so it was no wonder that they were defeated. Men, send down the order to speed up and gather with Wei Gong's troops as soon as possible. In order to not let Wei Gong take all the credit, Borromeo, who had always been cautious, was careless for once. This was naturally because the sky was dark, so no one could see what was happening in front of them. However, it was also because of Ing Zong and Shi Heng's repeated defeats, which caused the Walla to be arrogant and think that the Ming army could not withstand a single blow. Under the order, the 20,000 Walla cavalry increased their speed. In a few moments, they had traveled 10 li. When they reached here, they could faintly hear the dense gunshots in front of them. They're here, they're here. When Battalion Commander Wu Shang and his 4 company brothers saw the Walla cavalry approaching from afar, they immediately became excited. Previously, they were worried that the Walla's main force would shrink back because of the unclear situation in front of them. Now, it seemed that there was no need to worry. The excitement of Wu Shang and Leng Feng was seen by Sun Tong and Ming Jun, who were accompanying them. They were very confused. They couldn't understand. At most, there were only 1,100 people. How could they be so excited and happy when facing 20,000 enemies? Did these people not want to live anymore? Or were they too arrogant and did not put others in their eyes? Under the astonished gazes, Wu Shang and Leng Feng quickly checked the black firearms in their hands. Then, they formed a small semicircle and crawled on both sides of the road to Willow Town. 100 against 20,000, Wu Shang would not be so arrogant as to fight hand-to-hand with the enemy. They adopted the battle strategy that Yang Chendong taught them. That strategy was to retreat when the enemy advanced, harass when the enemy was stationary, attack when the enemy was tired, and advance when the enemy retreated. In the process of the Walla army's advance, they would give the enemy the most effective damage. At the same time, the enemy would be annoyed and unable to do anything to them. The soldiers of 4th Company were divided into 3 groups by platoon. The first platoon was personally led by Wu Shang. There were a total of 4 platoons, and they were also the strongest. They were responsible for blocking the Walla cavalry's advance. The second platoon was on the left, and the third platoon was on the right. They were responsible for blocking the advance of the Walla cavalry. Wu Shang had just given the 3 platoon leaders their tasks when Sun Tong hurriedly walked over. "Company Commander Wu, what can we do?" "You are responsible for following my platoon. Retreat as you fight on the road. Create a false impression that we are no match for the Walla cavalry. This will make them bolder and chase after us. That will be a great achievement." Wu Shang roughly explained the battle plan that he and young Master Yang Chendong had arranged. When Sun Chuanchu heard this military order, he was stunned at first. Then, he understood what it meant and said, "Company Commander Wu means that we should pretend to run away?" "Yes, something like that." "Why? Is there a problem, Commander Sun?" Wu Shang thought that this understanding was not wrong. However, one kind of defeat was intentional, and the other was genuine. He just did not know how the 1,000 Ming soldiers would perform. Chapter 2:10. No problem. Hearing that they were just pretending to run away, Sun Tong nodded firmly. If he had to lead 1,000 soldiers to fight against the 20,000 elite Walla cavalry, it would be impossible. But when it came to running away, there was no need to disguise anything. Everyone knew what to do, right? In fact, it was exactly so. When the 20,000 Walla cavalrymen appeared and displayed their majestic and powerful side, the 1,000 Ming soldiers actually displayed their inability to run away vividly. Before Wu Shang and Sun Tong even gave any orders, the 1,000 Ming soldiers began to collapse. This was not an act, but a genuine fear in their hearts. In the end, what they showed was exactly what Wu Shang had predicted. It was even more realistic than what he had imagined. And for such an outcome to occur, it didn't seem to be as simple as acting. Instead, he really did run away because he was afraid. The Ming soldiers in front of them were defeated before they even made contact. When the Walla cavalry saw this scene, they burst into laughter. Then they charged forward without any fear. It looked like they wanted to beat the enemy when they were down. The Walla cavalry, who wanted to fight for glory, rushed out with more than 1,000 men. This was exactly what Wu Shang wanted. He was only leading a company and had limited military strength. In this situation, if the enemy had too many soldiers, he could only retreat in order to ensure that he did not suffer any casualties. But if the enemy only had 1,000 men, he was confident that he could defeat them. Use flag signals to give orders to the 2nd and 3rd platoons. Let them fight according to the previous plan. The first row of warriors will wait for the enemy cavalry to enter our shooting range. Let's kill them. There's no need to hold back. Wu Shang looked at the dust on the road opposite him and saw more and more enemy cavalry approaching him. He then gave the order to the cold vanguard soldiers. They could not wait, especially when they heard the gunfire behind them. The morale of the cold vanguard soldiers was high. They finally had a chance to perform well in front of the 6th young master. Of course, they did not want to miss this opportunity. As time passed, Wu Shang's 4th company, brimming with battle intent, finally came into close contact with Walla's 1,000 cavalrymen. When the distance between the two sides was less than 200 steps, and those with good eyesight could even see the shadows of the other side, Wu Shang decisively gave the order to open fire. For a moment, the 40-man team of cold vanguard spat out tongues of flame from their firearms. At this time, there was no need to aim at all. He only needed to rely on his intuition to shoot at the black shadow in the distance. As the gunshots continued to ring out, sparks streaked across the sky like meteors. One by one, the cavalrymen fell from their horses. Many of them did not understand what had happened even until they died. 80 to 90% of the Walla cavalry in the first 3 rows were wiped out, which allowed the Walla cavalry behind to see the situation in front of them clearly. When a Walla Chiliarch saw that they had lost 20 to 30% of their troops, his eyes widened in anger and he shouted angrily, "Everyone, don't be afraid. This is the Ming army's firearms camp. As long as we can charge in, it's time to show off. Kill." After 200 to 300 of their men were killed, the Vara cavalry did not retreat. Instead, they charged forward, shouting their unique Mongolian language and chant. It was clear that they wanted to use the advantage of the speed of their horses to charge into the Ming army. Then they would start a massacre. The Walla cavalry was very fast and charged forward like a whirlwind. In the dark night, it gave people the feeling that dark clouds were pressing down on the city. If they were facing the Ming army this time, even if the Ming army was several times more powerful than them, they would still have a chance of winning. They would even be able to beat the Ming army until they covered their heads and ran away. Unfortunately, they were facing the Xianxia's new cold vanguard army, which was 100 times more powerful than them. Facing an enemy that was dozens of times more powerful than them, they were not afraid at all. Instead, they were excited. Raising the 95 style in his hand, Commander Wuxia shouted, "Attack!" Not only on the official road, but on both sides of the official road, tongues of fire also sprayed out, completely surrounding the Wu's cavalry from afar in a fan-shaped formation. Bang bang bang! Under the sounds of gunfire, the pitiful Walla cavalry were like paddy fields swept by a hurricane. Plop 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 plop, they fell to the ground one by one. From afar, the sounds of men and horses being overturned could be heard. The cold vanguard never knew what it meant to be soft when facing enemies. They may have a soft side, but that side was only for their family and friends, as well as the young master Yang Chendong that they were loyal to. As for other people, they were no different from animals. Hundreds of tongues of fire were fired, and only 1,000 Walla cavalry corpses were left on the official road. This vanguard army finally paid with their lives for their arrogance. When the child General Borromeo arrived with a large group of men, all he saw was a ground full of corpses and the stench of blood in the air. Report. The Ming army is retreating. There are about 1,000 of them, and they are less than 5 miles away from us. The elite Walla army scouts quickly determined the situation of the Ming army from the traces on the ground, and reported it to General Borromeo. When he heard that 1,000 of his elite warriors were killed by 1,000 Ming soldiers, Borromeo's eyes flashed with intense anger. He had a vicious side to him, and people like him were the most vengeful. Since someone had slapped him, if he did not catch the culprit and punish him 100 or 1,000 times, he would not let it go. Order the army to advance. We must catch up to the Ming army, and then, kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive. In his anger, Borromeo gave out the order to kill. When the Jianghu under him heard this, they immediately got on their horses and galloped forward. The Walla cavalry was determined to kill the Ming army that was 5 miles away. It was as if a vicious wolf had set its eyes on a sheep, opening its bloody mouth. However, it seemed that their teeth were not sharp. Facing the retreating Cold Front 4th Company, not only did they not manage to swallow their prey as they had expected, they even broke a few teeth along the way. It was a great loss. After a few charges, they were beaten back a few times. After losing another 1,000 cavalry, the Walla cavalry had advanced more than 10 miles and was now 5 miles away from Willow Town. At this time, Wu Xing's 4th Company had already met up with Xiao Feng's 1st Company. The soldiers of the two companies were naturally in high spirits. Tonight's battle could be said to be extremely satisfying. Everyone had obtained a lot of gains. Compared to them, the Ming army was far worse. Especially Sun Pua and the 1,000 Ming soldiers that followed the 4th Company. They carried out their mission very well, running and running all the way, acting very well. No. It should be said that without the 4th Company at the back, they would have already collapsed, or rather they would have already collapsed. After retreating 5 miles to the west of Willow Town, the 4th Company and the 1st Company met up, and they had more than 3,000 Ming soldiers. However, this strength was not enough to stop the charging Ming army. Borromeo's troops. In other words, the plan did not have any intention of stopping them. Instead, the Ming army started to retreat like the tide, leaving a path to Willow Town. Willow Town. Walla's vanguard general, Nai Gong, ordered his warriors to charge forward and back a few times. After losing soldiers, they finally knew the power of the Ming army that surrounded them. The original 10,000 people quickly became less than 4,000 people. They finally became well-behaved and did not struggle. Instead, they went from attacking to defending, preparing to wait for reinforcements to arrive. Without waiting for too long, Borromeo's troops entered Willow Town from the west. The moment he entered the town, he saw injured vanguard warriors everywhere. Borromeo was in disbelief. Was this still the vanguard army that did not put the heroes of the world in their eyes? This was exactly the same as the great Ming army that was defeated in the Tumu incident. Finally seeing Borromeo, Nai Gong, a 7-foot man, was so emotional that he almost cried. With a plop, he half-knelt in front of Borromeo, praising the strength of the Ming army and his failure to break out of the encirclement. Nai Gong was a fierce general, and he rarely put other people in his eyes. Even though Borromeo was Yeshin's younger brother like the dead Sai Yan Wang, he still did not put them in his eyes. For him to half-kneel in front of Borromeo, one could imagine how big of a blow he had suffered, to the point where he could even give up half of his dignity. Is the Ming army really that powerful? After hearing his grandfather's description, Borromeo had a bad feeling in his heart. Along the way, he had fought with the Ming army. Along the way, he had advanced triumphantly and had not seen much resistance. However, when he thought about how only his own warriors had died along the way and not a single Ming army corpse, Borromeo felt that something was not right. However, he could not put his finger on it. Logically speaking, with his current military strength, even if the Ming army wanted to play some tricks, what did he have to fear? Not to mention that he had met up with Nai Gong's troops. Facing the encirclement of 10,000 Ming soldiers, what could they do to him? In the end, it all depended on strength. Without enough strength, even if you use tactics well, what could you do? Since when can seeing a sheep kill a wolf? Borromeo did not know. It was true that the Ming army was a sheep, but there was also a tiger working with them. Although it was only a cub, when it opened its mouth and bared its fangs, it was still very frightening. It could also swallow an adult wolf. Chapter 2:11. Report. We suddenly discovered a large number of Ming soldiers at the west side of the town. They are blocking our way back. A Walla scout ran to Borromeo and knelt on the ground, reporting everything he saw. Borromeo was still trying to figure out what was wrong when he heard the scout's report. His eyes lit up, and he quickly figured out all the problems. But then, his face was filled with disbelief. According to his thoughts, the Ming army wanted to surround him and Nai Gong's troops and then eat them all. But the report said that the army only had 10,000 people. Did they have the ability to do this? What was going on? Even if the report was wrong and the Ming army came to the capital, how could the Ming army, who had just suffered 2 defeats at the hands of Tumu and Shihang, have such courage? Borromeo thought and decided to go to the west side of the town to take a look. General Nai Gong also had a face of disbelief as he followed behind Borromeo to the west side of Willow Town. 50 li away from Willow Town, Walla's rear army was resting under the command of their leader, Yes Hen. In front of them were the 2 armies he sent out. This night, Yes Hen slept exceptionally well. After seeing the Ming army's main force destroyed, he didn't think that there was anyone who could threaten him. But what Yes Hen didn't know was that at this moment, 800 steps away from his tent, Yang Qindong had already arrived. He stood on an inconspicuous small hill and used a night vision telescope to look down at everything in his camp. The layout of the camp is somewhat loose on the outside but tight on the inside. Yang Qindong slowly lowered the binoculars in front of his eyes. A gentle and confident smile appeared on his face. "Young master, should we inform them to move?" The tall Beta Persei, who was more than 8 feet tall, asked in a heavy voice. "Yes, use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move, hee. Yang Qindong nodded lightly. Now, everything was going according to his plan. This made him feel like he was in control of the world. In fact, for this operation, Yang Qindong did pay a lot. At least, he took out a lot of good things from the warehouse. On the surface, the warehouse was a large military warehouse for the country. Not only were there some advanced weapons produced in the country, but there were also some weapons that were ready to be deployed. There were also some cutting-edge weapons that were collected from all over the world for self-research purposes. And now, all of this was under Yang Qindong's control. This time, in order to effectively attack the Walla's army and achieve his goal, he specially mobilized the FGT-203mm towed artillery from the warehouse. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was the largest caliber field artillery developed by China. It was developed by the Northern Industrial Company. This system was mainly used by military-level combat units. It had a long range, great power, and high accuracy. It could be equipped with a variety of special ammunition. It was the backbone of long-range firepower. Although the artillery was dismounted, its range exceeded that of the same type of artillery in the United States and Russia, and it was given the title of Asia's first artillery. The FGT-203mm towed artillery was very cumbersome, and its mobility was not as good as other artillery. In addition, it was easy to expose the target, and it was slow to retreat after being attacked. It was precisely because of these shortcomings that its development was eventually stopped. There was an FGT-203mm towed cannon in the warehouse, and it was displayed as an antique. This time, Yang Chendong took it out. In addition to wanting to review the power of this cannon, he also relied on the fact that the warehouse only needed to place the cannon in one place, and there was no need for it to be moved. Also, this artillery had an effective range of 50 kilometers, and its lethality was very large. It was perfect for him to use in this battle. The FGT 203mm towed artillery was taken out and placed in a hidden place. Yang Chendong didn't forget to bring Hu Mang and Lang Song's first platoon of the second company to the artillery. When they found the artillery, these experienced Lang Feng soldiers widened their eyes. The FGT 203mm towed artillery was very powerful. It could hurt both enemies and oneself. Once such a heavy firearm appeared, Yang Chendong had always been very careful. He brought his most trusted subordinate Tiger's Mane with him so that he could be in charge of using the artillery. After handing the FGT 203mm towed artillery to Tiger's Mane, he did some simple operations and told the other Cold Front soldiers how to fire the artillery. He also told them in detail the exact location of the artillery. After that, Yang Chendong left a long-range radio communicator and arrived outside the Walla army camp. Looking at the sleeping enemy in front of him, he felt that it was time to wake them up. Use the radio to inform Tiger's Mane that we can move now. Let's hope he can hit more accurately, Yang Chendong said as he led the Cold Front soldiers in 2nd Platoon and 3rd Platoon of 2nd Company to retreat. After all, this was a cannon. There was a chance of accidental damage. If they were killed by their own artillery before they could hit the enemy, there would be no way to explain themselves. Beta Persei clumsily used the radio to contact Tiger's Mane. After telling him the 6th young master's intention, Tiger's Mane, who was in a mountain valley about 30 kilometers away, gave the order to fire the artillery with a serious expression. There were 2 FGT 203mm towed cannons in total. Under Tiger Light's command, Lang Feng's brothers, who had systematically and seriously studied artillery knowledge, began to operate the cannons in an orderly manner. They weren't very familiar with it. After the necessary procedures were carefully carried out, a golden artillery shell that could only be carried by an adult was sent into the barrel. Under Tiger's Mane's order, one of the FGT 203mm towed artillery cannons that had its coordinates adjusted by Yang Chendong let out a roar. After a sudden tremble, flames whizzed out of the muzzle and flew straight into the Walla army camp about 30 kilometers away. Most of the Walla soldiers were immersed in their dreams. This time, they had gained a lot of benefits. Many of the soldiers' faces were filled with satisfied smiles. But all of this was interrupted by a deafening sound. Boom! A roar like a small earthquake sounded, and then the artillery shell landed in the Walla army camp, producing a huge flame that spread out from the center. The shrapnel of the bomb was like countless meteorites flying in the sky, piercing through one tent after another, producing bursts of wailing and howling. Not far away, Beta Persei and the others looked at the mushroom-like flames. Although they were prepared, they were still stunned. But soon, this shock turned into worship, and their eyes fell on Yang Chendong, who was standing in the middle of them. At this time, Yang Chendong was smiling. He was happy that he hadn't forgotten about his work. The artillery shell was still very accurate. This was also thanks to the fact that in his previous life, the country found more than a dozen artillery experts to train him for a month to complete a mission. At that time, he was so busy that he didn't even have time to sleep. Looking at the results now, he felt that everything was worth it. Inform Tiger's Mane, adjust the target to the left and right, and fire the second shell. Since the coordinates were prepared, Yang Chendong had nothing to be afraid of. He continued to give orders to Beta Persei, asking him to use the radio communicator to inform Tiger's Mane 30 miles away. At this moment, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Even the soldiers who were usually sleeping were awakened by the loud noise. Some of them, wearing simple pajamas, rushed out of their tents and looked at the mess in front of them. From time to time, they would rub their eyes to make sure that this was not a dream, but reality. Just when everyone was still in a daze and wondering what was going on, the second shell fell as scheduled. The landing point was 50 steps to the left of the first shell. With another loud noise, some unlucky soldiers stood in the area of the bombardment. At that moment, they successfully fulfilled their childhood dream and flew into the sky. But this was just a flash in the pan. Soon, they fell to the ground under the influence of gravity. However, when he landed on the ground, there was not the slightest sign of life. The artillery fire in the dark night was dazzling and eye-catching. Yang Chendong and the others were enjoying everything in front of them as if they were watching fireworks. In contrast, the Walla army camp was already in a mess. Leader Yes Hen had already been awakened. He was wearing a cloak, and under the protection of the soldiers, he looked blankly at the balls of fire one after another. His lips were trembling, and he seemed to be mumbling something at the moment. Yes Hen was indeed stunned by the scene in front of him. He had never seen or even dared to imagine a scene so real in front of him, making him feel like he was in a dream. However, the cries of the soldiers were so real, and the smell of blood was so thick. The cruel reality was telling him that everything was so real, and there was not the slightest hint of falsehood in it. "Leader, let's leave this place quickly. It's too dangerous here." A trusted aide watched as the flames that could devour lives fell around them from time to time. He was afraid that the next moment, it would threaten the safety of his master. Thus, he hurriedly reminded his master of the situation. "Wait, it stopped. Just as he instinctively wanted to nod his head and abandon the warriors who supported him, everything suddenly became quiet again. Although there were still fires burning and the screams of the soldiers were incessant, there was no more gunfire. The danger seemed to have gone away. Chapter 2:12. Report. Just when everyone was still trying to figure out what was going on, just when they were not sure if the wrath of the heavens would descend again, a scout hurried to Yes Hen and knelt on the ground. There was a trace of panic in his voice as he said, "Leader, there is a Ming soldier outside the camp. He said he has a letter for you." "Where is he?" When he heard that a Ming soldier dared to come to the camp, Yeshen's eyes narrowed. A boundless killing intent and anger rose from the bottom of his heart. "He is under the control of our brothers." The scout felt his leader's killing intent and did not even dare to raise his head as he answered, "Kill him." When his trusted aides heard that a Ming soldier was under control, they immediately shouted loudly. It was as if killing the messenger would not be enough to quell the anger in their hearts. "Wait a moment." Yes Hen waved his hand lightly. "Let's see what is written in the letter first." Since he dared to come and deliver a letter, he must be someone who dared to die. Even if someone like him was killed, it would not be of much benefit to Walla. It was better to see the other party's intentions first and understand his thoughts before speaking. Walla took the letter and opened it in his hand. Immediately, the vigorous and powerful Chinese characters appeared in his eyes. The letter was written by Yang Chendong himself, and the calligraphy he had been practicing for a while finally came in handy. Leader Yes Hen Jun Jian. This lightning was inevitable because of Marquis actions. It is because Walla made such a big fuss and went against the harmony of the heavens. However, the heavens are virtuous. Marquis cannot bear to continue causing suffering and is willing to turn weapons of war into gifts of jade and silk. If you are willing, you can leave the city for a while. On the other hand, if the lightning continues, I am afraid that Walla's army will cease to exist. What choice do you have? Please think thrice before you act. Ming Dynasty's loyal Marquis Yang Chendong. There were not many words, but the purpose of the letter was very clear. According to the letter, the fiery light that could easily kill people was caused by Yang Chendong's actions. If he wanted to prevent such things from happening again, it was very simple. He just needed to leave the city for a while and he would know the requirements. Yes Hen didn't answer immediately. Instead, he passed the letter to his trusted aides. After they read it, they immediately gave their opinions. Some people said that they couldn't go out. This must be the trick of the loyal Marquis, in order to trick the leader into going out to look for the killing opportunity. Others said that there was no need to be afraid of Liao Ming. Since they wanted to kill people, then they had to be prepared to be killed in return. Once the two sides met, they would not be far from each other. At that time, Walla's elite cavalry would slaughter everything. When Yes Hen heard this, his expression changed again and again. When he saw the messy barracks, as well as the countless injured subordinates, he finally said fiercely, "This leader wants to see what this loyal Marquis has to say. Men, gather 1,000 elite warriors and go out with this leader to meet him." Bringing 1,000 brothers, this was Yeshen's method of self-protection. He must meet with Yang Chendong. Apart from the fact that he didn't want to be hit by the huge power of the cannon, he also wanted to hear what the loyal Marquis had to say. It was easy to select 1,000 elite cavalry from tens of thousands of soldiers. After a while, they were gathered and followed Yes Hen out of the camp. 3 miles away from the camp, Yang Qindong stood on a protruding slope and looked into the distance under the protection of Beta Persei, Chiovi's first guard team, and 60 soldiers. Young master, Jianghu will be fine, right? Beta Persei had a rare look of nervousness. When he thought of Jianghu, who was sent to deliver the letter, his heart was filled with irritation. Nothing will happen. You have to believe in this young master. Yang Qindong still had a confident look on his face. He believed that since Yes Hen could stand out among the Walla generals, he was not a short-sighted person. When two armies fought, they would not kill the messenger, not to mention the threats in the letter. As long as they were not reckless people, they would definitely not do anything to Jianghu who delivered the letter. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. Beta Persei's worry was not without reason. In order to comfort him, Yang Qindong added, if Jianghu and his brothers were injured by the enemy, then this young master will bury the entire Walla army with them. At that time, no one will be left alive. His voice was so indifferent, without the slightest murderous intent or anger. But from this sentence, Beta Persei could clearly hear Yang Qindong's determination. He thought that for the life of one of his brothers, he would bury the entire Walla army with them. Suddenly, he was a little envious of Jianghu. His own death in exchange for such a spectacular scene, it seemed worth it no matter how he looked at it. This sentence was not only heard by Beta Persei, but also by all the brothers who were protecting Yang Qindong. For some reason, at this moment, they just felt a rush of hot blood in their bodies, making it difficult for them to calm down. It was as if they had to do something. In the midst of this restlessness, a group of troops came from not far away. It was not very clear in the night, but based on their instincts, everyone could feel that there should be a large number of people, at least 10 times more than them. Walla's troops had indeed appeared. At this moment, all the restlessness in the hearts of the Lang Feng's troops disappeared. This was the ability of a veteran of hundreds of battles. No matter what kind of emotions they had, once they entered a state of war, they would always be able to recover their body and mind to their best state in the shortest time possible. Young master, they're here. Jianghu led the way, and after seeing Yang Qindong, he quickly rode over on his horse. In the process of approaching, the Walla army was considered to be well behaved. No one moved recklessly, and there was no sound of horses neighing. It was so quiet that it seemed like they were elites. Very good, thank you for your hard work, Yang Qindong chuckled, and then Beta Persei led a snow-white horse over from the side. Yang Qindong leaped lightly and landed on the horse. Then, he moved forward. Young master. Yang Qindong's actions caused the Lang Feng's troops behind him to shout in unison. In response, Yang Qindong reined in his horse and stopped. He turned to the crowd and revealed a bright smile, saying, I believe that with all of you here, this young master will definitely be fine, right? No one answered, but they all nodded in unison. Their uniform movements showed the attitude of these Lang Feng's troops. They swore in their hearts that as long as they were still alive, they would never let the sixth young master's personal safety be threatened in the slightest. Ha ha ha. Seeing how confident the Lang Feng's troops were, Yang Qindong could not help but laugh to the sky. Then, he slowly rode forward on his horse and shouted loudly, The great Ming's loyal marquis wishes to see leader Yes Hen. Do you dare to meet him? Why wouldn't I dare? A similar shout came from the other side of the night. Then, a strong horse leaped out of the troops and came forward. The distance between the two parties was less than 3 li. The place where they met was between the two parties. Then, the two stopped 10 steps away from each other. Yes Hen leaped out on his horse with a grand aura. Of course, the reason he dared to do so was because he believed that this area was safe. However, he did not know that under the cover of night, the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad had quickly approached and completely included him in the range of being killed at any time. Yang Qindong and Yes Hen looked at each other. When he saw that the other party was looking at him seriously, he smiled and said, As expected of the leader of the Walla, your boldness is admirable. You're too kind. The loyal marquis is indeed a rising star of the great Ming dynasty. You actually dare to meet me at such a close distance. It can be seen that you are also a bold person. Then, tell me, what is this so-called heavenly lightning all about? Also, don't try to fool me with some nonsense about ghosts and gods. I have lived for so long and I do not believe in such things. I only believe in one thing, and that is myself and my own strength. Yes Hen wanted to gain the upper hand by a show of strength. He had killed his way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Only then did he have his current achievements and position. He did not believe that a scholar of the great Ming dynasty who was less than 20 years old and only knew how to read books every day would have any knowledge. As long as he could successfully suppress the other party, it would be easy to get the truth. Once he knew the truth, whether to talk or kill would be completely up to him. To Yang Qindong, it sounded like a joke to him that he was the first to come up and threaten him. If he did not want to keep Yes Hen to continue pressuring the great Ming dynasty and create enough space and time for his own development, he was afraid that there would not be this meeting at all. Instead, he would have directly dealt with Yes Hen. He had his own plan, so he did not touch Yes Hen. But now, this person had other ideas. It was ridiculous to think about it. Looking at Yes Hen, who was still pretending to be angry, Yang Qindong shrugged indifferently. Marquis knows how to use divine techniques. If you don't believe me, then it's easy. I can make the thunder reappear in minutes. Do you want to try? She originally thought that she had seen through Yang Qindong's trick, but she didn't expect him to be so calm at this time. Her eyes couldn't help but become a lot colder. Don't try to test this chief's bottom line, or you will regret it. I will regret it, ha ha ha. As if he had heard the biggest joke in the world, Yang Qindong looked up to the sky and roared. Then, he suddenly stopped. Then, his right hand turned into a fist and gently pushed forward. This was a signal to Beta Persei behind him to fire. Beta Persei had been watching the sixth young master's every move. Seeing that he had made his move, he immediately used the radio station to call for Tiger's mane. Although he stretched out his hand, the thunder that should have appeared did not immediately appear. Yes Hen was nervous at first, but his face soon relaxed. Ha ha ha, let's see. Reality will expose all your lies. Boom! A loud noise came out and landed in the barracks behind Yes Hen. The Walla tent that had just quieted down was once again filled with cries and shouts. Chapter 213. The smile on Yeshen's face froze in an instant. Then it became very ugly. The sky thunder killed his loyal warriors. He glared at Yang Qindong and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't you know that we are still negotiating?" Yang Qindong ignored Yeshen's roar. Instead, he grinned and revealed a sinister smile. Then, he switched to his left hand and gestured at the warhorse under Yes Hen. As if to coordinate with this gesture, a bullet suddenly flew out from an unknown place and shot into his strong warhorse. The originally strong horse suddenly neighed in pain and fell to its knees with a plop. The sudden movement of the warhorse caught Yes Hen off guard. He fell from the warhorse without any warning. Because he was quite skilled, he did not get his face covered in dust. He only staggered a little and his body tilted a little, but he quickly returned to his original state. With a push of his right hand and a tap of his left hand, Yes Hen was no longer as unforgiving as before. He became much more obedient. However, the soldiers behind him did not know what happened. When they saw their leader fall from the warhorse, they thought that something bad had happened. Suddenly, 5 strong horses rushed out and leaped straight at him. "Fall, all of you!" Since he wanted to establish his might, he naturally wouldn't give the other party a chance. Under Yang Qindong's angry roar, the Ghost Shadow Sniper team ambushed behind him took action. The 5 warhorses were locked in an instant. Only half of the way forward, they fell to the ground one by one. With night vision goggles and advanced sniping techniques, Bai Zhua and his team members had complete control of the small battlefield. Above! Seeing that 5 of their own warriors had fallen, the other Vala people were still shouting in disbelief. However, they were the first to react quickly. They turned around and gathered their chi in their dantian, shouting loudly, "All of you, stop! Without my orders, no one is to act rashly. Otherwise, you will be punished by military law." Yes Hen was really scared. He was frightened by Yang Qindong's gesture. He could not see what the other party did, but his men died one by one. Could it be that he really knew some kind of magic? Yes Hen, who had doubts in his heart, quickly analyzed that Yang Qindong did not mean to kill him. Otherwise, why would he talk so much nonsense? If he pointed at him, wouldn't he die on the ground like the other Walla cavalry? Since he knew that Yang Qindong did not want to kill him, he was calm. First, he stopped his men from acting rashly. Then, when he looked at Yang Qindong, his tone became much gentler. He even asked with a hint of respect, "Tell me, what do you want?" I don't think you want to kill me, right? That's right. Yang Chendong clapped his hands as if he was praising Yeshen's understanding. However, this slap gave him a fright. He instinctively tensed up his body and prepared to defend himself at any time. It was as if he thought that this slap was some kind of demonic technique. Yang Chendong did not ridicule Yeshen's loss of composure. Instead, he said in a calm tone, "In the eyes of Marquis, your life is the same as the other Walla people's lives. It is not worth a penny more. Therefore, Marquis has no need to kill you. This time, I asked you to come out to talk to you about the Walla army retreating." Retreating? Yes, Hen was puzzled. Yes, it's retreating. Of course, if you don't retreat, Marquis also has the ability to kill all of you here, just like in the Tumu castle. Although you have fewer people, you still manage to kill 500,000 soldiers of the Great Ming dynasty. Yang Chendong knew what the other party was suspecting. It was nothing more than the lack of military strength, so he casually gave an example. As soon as he heard about the Battle of the Tumu Castle, Yeshen's face showed a proud expression, but after he understood what Yang Chendong meant, his face changed instantly. "Do you think you can be like our Walla warriors and win with fewer people?" "What? Do you think the effect of the heavenly thunder is still not enough? If that's the case, then Marquis doesn't mind a few more." Yang Chendong saw that Yes Hen still wanted to get lucky. His face changed immediately, and then he slowly raised his right hand again. This action made Yeshen's expression change. "Wait, I believe you." Yes Hen couldn't help but be nervous. The effect of the heavenly thunder was too powerful. A casual strike could kill hundreds and thousands of people. If such a heavenly thunder struck again, he was worried that Walla's morale would be destroyed. If that was the case, how could they still talk about dominating the Great Ming dynasty? Yes Hen finally became obedient, and Yang Chendong naturally withdrew his right hand. "How is it? Do you agree to retreat?" "I agree. This chief will order the entire army to retreat," Yi Xian said in a somewhat dispirited manner. This time, he had come full of confidence, but he returned in disappointment. If it was anyone else, their expression would not be good. "No, no, no." Who knew that when Yang Chendong heard that the whole army should retreat, he shook his head. "We have to retreat, but not like this." Marquis remembered correctly. In the Tumu castle, you should have captured a lot of Ming dynasty soldiers. Now send them back. If there is one less person, you don't have to go back. "What? Are you threatening me?" When he heard that Yang Chendong wanted all the captives, Yeshen's expression changed. He widened his eyes, as if he was going to fight for his life. Yang Chendong, who had already controlled the situation, acted as if he didn't see Yeshen's so-called fierce face. "Marquis is threatening you. What? Are you not convinced? If that's the case, Marquis doesn't mind using the heavenly thunder to destroy you." After that, Marquis will lead the army into Walla. When that time comes, not only will the Great Ming dynasty's captives be taken back, even the women and children of Walla will become the Great Ming dynasty's captives. "Do you believe me?" Yang Chendong said without showing any weakness. These words were like thousands of needles piercing Yeshen's heart, making him unable to refute. If it was someone else who said this, he might laugh out loud and give the order to kill them. However, these words came from Yang Chendong's mouth. Thinking back to the various actions just now, he was really worried that the other party would do this. In the face of such a powerful heavenly thunder, could the Walla cavalry really withstand it? While Yes Hen was still thinking about how to deal with it, Yang Chendong continued to speak. "Marquis only asked you to return the captives. He didn't ask for the gold and silver that you robbed. This is already extra lenient. Furthermore, in Willow Town dozens of miles away, your vanguard army is surrounded by Marquis. If you return the Great Ming dynasty's captives, Marquis can also let these people go. This is a fair trade. If you don't agree, then there's no need to talk. Marquis will kill you within 3 breaths." After speaking, Yang Chendong gently raised his left hand. This action clearly meant to kill Yes Hen. He had already seen the serious consequences of reaching out his left and right hands, so he didn't dare to test the law. He immediately shouted, "Wait, this is such a big matter. No matter what, this chief has to go back and discuss it with his subordinates first. I'm sorry, before all the Great Ming dynasty's captives are released, you can't leave here." Yang Chendong shook his head and said with a look that said, Don't play tricks, it's useless to think about it. Are you going to take me as a hostage? Yes Hen said very discontentedly when he heard this. It was just that after saying this sentence, he didn't speak anymore. The reality was already like this. Wasn't it too late for him to react now? He couldn't leave, and he couldn't beat him. Reality forced Yes Hen to agree to Yang Chendong's conditions. However, although he agreed, Yes Hen was still a little worried. Would Yang Chendong act shamelessly? Therefore, after hesitating for a while, he raised his head and said, "Loyal Marquis, but I don't know if you will let me go if I release the captives. Also, will you release all the besieged warriors in Walla?" Seeing that Yes Hen also wanted to make a request, Yang Chendong said indifferently, "What? Do you think that other than believing in Marquis, you have the qualifications to negotiate with Marquis? You." After being said this by Yang Chendong, Yeshen's face changed again and again. It was obvious that he was very angry. Haha, Marquis is joking with you. In fact, with your intelligence you can think about it. If Marquis wanted to kill you, why would he talk nonsense with you? As for the captives of the Great Ming, Marquis can bring his army to kill them after killing all of you. Presumably, Walla doesn't have the strength to stop the Great Ming's army now. However, Marquis didn't do this, which is already a kind of sincerity. As for your people who are besieged in Willow Town, I have to trouble you to send someone to inform them not to try to break out of the encirclement. Tell them to stay here obediently and wait for the results of our negotiation. Naturally, they will be released. During this period, if anyone dares to act rashly, they will only die. Don't blame Marquis for not reminding you. Since he had already said this, Yes Hen had to accept it even if he didn't want to. However, after thinking about it carefully, Yang Chendong didn't seem to have the intention to destroy Walla. Otherwise, he could do it now and Yes Hen wouldn't have the strength to fight back. There was no other choice. Yes Hen was forced by Yang Chendong's strength and finally lowered his head. He turned around and shouted to the army behind him. He called a few fast horse scouts and arranged them to inform the brothers in Willow Town not to act rashly. In addition, they were to inform the captives of the Great Ming army to escort them back to the loyal Marquis. After the order was given, the scouts left. Yang Chendong smiled and waved his hand. The first guard captain, Chiu Vi, brought people to deliver wine and food to Yes Hen. "Leader Walla, the night is long and there are too many things to do. Why don't we drink while waiting?" Yes Hen looked at the wooden table in front of him, as well as the hot food and wine. He was even more surprised in his heart. The loyal Marquis of the Great Ming seemed to have calculated everything and knew that he would compromise. He even prepared wine and food. Well, there was nothing to say. Let's eat first. Chapter 214. Willow Town. After Borromeo met up with General Nai Gong, he tried to charge out a few more times, but they all ended in failure. After many warriors died, the morale of the army began to waver. When faced with the general's order to break out of the encirclement, not many people were willing to go along with it. Charging out despite knowing that they would die wasn't bravery, but recklessness. Everyone only had one life. Who was willing to die so carelessly? As they waited and broke out of the encirclement, the sky gradually began to brighten. It also welcomed the scouts sent out by Yes Hen. When the scouts arrived and said that their leader didn't want them to break out of the encirclement and to wait in Willow Town, the first to disagree was Borromeo. This time, he came with great ambition, but suffered heavy losses time and time again. This made him feel great shame. Seeing that the sky was already bright, the problem that restricted their vision was solved. It was time to charge out, but he was told to stay in place and wait for orders. How could he be willing to accept that? Did my big brother really say that? Does he know that we have already investigated that there are only a few thousand Ming soldiers surrounding us? With our 20,000 soldiers, we can definitely charge out. When that time comes, it will be our time of great victory. Borromeo said to the scouts with a face of unwillingness. Unfortunately, these scouts didn't have any status. They were only here to pass on a message. They couldn't give any reply to Borromeo's words. Seeing that the scouts didn't say anything, Borromeo straightforwardly shook his head. "You said that my big brother is facing off against the loyal Marquis, right? That's good. Say, if you suddenly charge out of Willow Town and come behind the loyal Marquis, do you think you can eliminate him with a pincer attack? If that's the case, will there be anyone in the great Ming dynasty who dares to oppose the Walla? There shouldn't be anyone. The scouts seemed to have seen some hope as they replied. In reality, the scouts didn't really understand the order this time. However, since their leader had spoken, they had to carry it out. Seeing that the scouts he sent agreed with his suggestion, Borromeo couldn't help but be overjoyed. Good. Since the people sent by Big Brother have agreed, then we will do as this general says. As soon as Borromeo finished speaking, the vanguard general beside him immediately raised a different opinion. We can't do that. The scouts are only there to relay orders. They don't understand the situation on the battlefield at all, so we should listen to the leader. The scouts don't understand the situation on the battlefield, but we do. General Nigong, don't tell me that you've become discouraged and scared after being defeated a few times in one night. You're our Vala's general. You should be brave and fearless. Borromeo said with a mocking smile. After being refuted by Borromeo, the general's expression changed again and again. However, he was not good with words and didn't know what to say. In the end, he simply turned his head away and used his actions instead of his mouth to express himself. If you want to disobey, then go ahead. This general will listen to the leader's orders and stay in Willow Town obediently. There were less than 4,000 soldiers left in the original vanguard army, which did not affect the overall situation. Since it didn't make sense, Borromeo decided to just ignore it. He would just lead the army forward. At that time, he would kill the Great Ming's loyal marquis and the credit would be his alone. Perhaps it was because he couldn't wait any longer, or perhaps it was because he wanted to make a contribution, that child Borromeo ignored his elder brother's orders and began to gather his troops. Taking advantage of the darkness of the sky, he headed for the western end of Willow Town and made a counterattack. The sky was already bright. Commander Xiao Feng and Commander Wu Shang, who were in charge of guarding here, could also clearly see some of the situation in Willow Town. With the help of binoculars, they could see even further than the enemy. The Walla soldiers in the town suddenly began to gather. This scene was clearly captured by the two of them and they quickly guessed the enemy's intentions and thoughts. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support at any time. They knew that the Walla cavalry in town outnumbered them by 10 times. For safety reasons, it was also the 6th young master's order to inform Tiger's man to prepare once they discovered something that couldn't be disobeyed. Xiao Feng and Wu Xing didn't dare to be careless and quickly made preparations. In less than an hour, the west side of Willow Town suddenly became much more lively. Countless Walla cavalry charged out from here. Borromeo even took the initiative to lead the charge. He wanted to use his actions to inspire the other warriors to charge out of Willow Town and kill the Great Ming's loyal marquis. They're coming out, they're coming out. Everyone get ready. Inform Sir Tiger's man to prepare artillery support. After seeing countless enemies appear in front of their eyes, Xiao Feng and Wu Sheng both gave military orders to their own cold front soldiers. At the same time, they used the radio communicator to inform Tiger's man that they could fire. After Tiger's man received Xiao Feng and Wu Shang's request for reinforcements, he immediately loaded another FGT 203mm towed cannon that hadn't fired yet. One of the two FGT 203mm towed cannons was aimed at Yeshin's camp, while the other was aimed at Willow Town. At this moment, Tiger's man received the news and used the second cannon to fire. Borromeo was leading tens of thousands of Walla cavalry to charge out of Willow Town. Under his leadership, the morale of the army increased by a lot. Adding on the fact that they had a large number of people, they seemed to have an unstoppable momentum when they charged out of town. However, this seemingly powerful momentum was met with a hail of bullets from Xiao Feng's 1st Company and Wu Shang's 4th Company. Over 100 cavalrymen fell to the ground. However, this momentum didn't seem to have any intention of fading. On the contrary, it became more and more intense. With a continuous charge, more and more Walla cavalry fell to the ground. It was to the point that the path forward was blocked by the corpses of the war horses and soldiers. But in the end, because there were too many cavalrymen, they still managed to charge out. Among the crowd, when Borromeo saw that they had made it out of the town, his face lit up with joy. Holding a saber in his hand, he shouted loudly, a bloodthirsty glint in his eyes. He wanted to charge forward and kill all the Ming soldiers who had heavily injured the Walla cavalrymen, letting them know what it meant to overestimate one's abilities. Seeing the Walla army charging out and getting closer and closer to them, the three commanders of the Ming army, Sun Tong, Xianxia, and Mao Fushou, all had pale faces. Even though they still had 3,000 Ming soldiers under their command, they were all trembling in fear in the face of Walla's army. It looked like they would collapse at any moment. Boom! Just as the Ming army was in chaos and chaos was about to break out at any moment, just as Xiao Feng and Wu Shang were shooting with all their might with Lung Feng, the enemy was getting closer and closer due to their disadvantage in numbers. Just as it was extremely dangerous, a loud explosion suddenly sounded above their heads. Following that, a cannonball landed in the middle of Walla's army. The cannonball landed right where the Walla cavalry were most concentrated. With just one cannonball, at least 100 Walla cavalry soldiers were killed. As for the number of people who were injured, it was even more uncountable. Unfortunately, Borromeo was in the crowd. His originally ferocious face was directly swallowed by the cannonball. Not even his bones were left. Borromeo died, along with nearly 100 cavalrymen and even more injured people. This cannonball also stunned the advancing Walla cavalry. Before this, they had some understanding of the cannons of the Ming dynasty. However, those cannons could only shoot out a heavy iron ball. The damage it could cause was only in a straight line. As long as they avoided the iron ball that could only attack in a straight line, their lives would not be in danger. How could it be like this cannonball that landed without any warning? Moreover, when it landed under the flames, its lethality was so great that it gave people the feeling that there was no way to avoid it. The people who were stunned by the cannonball reined in their horses and stopped. Borromeo had died in battle. Without their commander, they felt like they did not know where to go. It was at this time that the second cannonball arrived. It once again landed in the crowd, causing the deaths of hundreds of cavalrymen and the injuries of hundreds of cavalrymen. Retreat! Seeing the soldiers around them being killed by the cannonballs and muskets, the morale that had just been built up instantly collapsed. The smart soldiers knew that if they retreated back to the town, they would not face such danger. In an instant, many of them retreated. This was like a plague that quickly spread. Other than the Walla cavalry at the front who could not turn back and became Lang Feng's target, the rest of the Walla cavalry retreated back to the town. The battle finally ended with the death of nearly 2,000 people. The ground was littered with corpses and the smell of blood. It seemed like this battle was originally a child's play. The army retreated back to the town and Nai Gong took over the command. When he ordered everyone not to leave without orders, he also sent out scouts to inform leader Yes Hen of what had happened. The scouts rushed out of the town and rushed in front of Lung Feng and the Ming soldiers with a terrified expression. Their faces were filled with fear, as if they were afraid that they would be killed by these murderous gods. If not for Yang Qindong's orders to allow the scouts to move back and forth, no one would be able to leave this place alive. The scouts rushed all the way and finally met with leader Yes Hen. They recounted in detail what had happened in Willow Town. When they mentioned that the child General Borromeo had been killed by the heavenly lightning, they did not even dare to raise their heads. Hearing that another brother had died on the battlefield, Yeshen's expression was naturally very ugly. However, he could not ask Yang Qindong for an explanation. It was his brother who did not listen to orders and took the initiative to fight. Now that he had died, who else could he blame? Forget it. Quickly inform the troops behind to bring all the captives of the Ming army here. Remember all of them. Do not leave a single one alive. Whoever dares to leave behind the captives of the Ming army, I will leave behind his head. Yes Hen, who was really scared by Yang Qindong, did not dare to play any tricks. He issued a strict order to his troops. Chapter 2:15. In the Imperial Palace, Daizong Zhu Qiu was pacing back and forth in the throne room. Because he was worried about the battle ahead, he could no longer remain seated on the dragon throne. Standing below were all the fourth-rank officials in the capital and above. They all looked anxious and uneasy, and everyone had a grim expression on their faces. The battle to defend the capital had undoubtedly reached a critical juncture. It would take at least 3 days for the new order to rescue the emperor to arrive at the capital. If the loyal Marquis lost to Yes Hen, the entire capital would be in danger, and everyone's lives would be in danger. But an entire night had passed, and there had been no report from the front line. How could they not be worried? At this moment, many people began to miss the rule of having eunuchs supervise the army. If there were eunuchs present, they would have already sent someone back to report what had happened on the front line. They would not be like this, where everyone could only passively and anxiously wait. The officials had been here since early in the morning, but there was nothing they could do. Some of the officials were unwilling to wait. Seeing that there was nothing they could do, Minister of War Yi Ming stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, should we send someone to the front line to see what the situation is like? No matter what, we have to make preparations early." There were many explanations for what "make preparations early" meant. If they won, they naturally had to make preparations to celebrate. If they lost, they had to make preparations to flee. That's right, that's right. With Yi Ming taking the lead, the other officials quickly responded. One by one, they stood up and spoke to the emperor. How could Zhu Qiyu not want to know the situation on the front line? For this reason, he had sent out many scouts and spies, but not a single one had returned. At this time, he truly didn't know who to send out. On the other hand, Great Eunuch Jin Ying's eyes turned as he thought of something. He carefully took 2 steps forward and said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "Your Majesty, we can send the embroidered uniform guard commissioner Hu Zhongning and request that he bring back the news." Hu Zhongning? Zhu Qiyu's brow creased as he began to think about this person. Zhu Qiyu, who had recently spent a lot of time to understand the officials, quickly figured out Hu Zhongning's identity. This person was not only the eldest son of the Minister of Rights, Hu Xiao, but more importantly, he was also the father-in-law of the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage, Yang Chendong. The people that had been sent out earlier must have been stopped by Yang Chendong and were not allowed to return. However, if Hu Zhongning were to go and face his father-in-law, he would not be able to stop him. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh at how smart Jining was. He immediately turned around and asked the officials, "Is Minister Hu Zhongning here?" "Your subject is here." When Hu Chongning, who was standing behind the officials, heard the emperor's words, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he stepped forward with a board in his hand. When the officials saw that the emperor was calling for Hu Zhongning, they quickly opened up a path so that the guardian of the brocade guard could face the emperor directly. "Beloved Minister Hu, we now order you to bring people to the front lines to understand the situation of the battle, then quickly report back. Remember, you must complete this order as quickly as possible. Otherwise, you will be severely punished." Zhu Qiyu purposely emphasized the word severely, in order to remind Hu Zhongning that it was his son-in-law who was leading the troops into battle. No one would make things difficult for him unless he wanted to make things difficult for himself. Hu Zhongning naturally understood Zhu Qiyu's meaning. In his heart, he did not want to make things difficult for his son-in-law. However, since he had the emperor's order, he did not dare to disobey. "Your subject obeys the emperor's order. I will definitely go and return quickly." After saying this, Hu Zhongning turned and left the hall. Seeing Hu Zhongning's figure disappear, Zhu Qiyu finally let out a long sigh of relief. Presumably, before long, there would be a report from the front lines. Hopefully it would be good news. After Hu Zhongning left the palace, he brought along Lieutenant Gao and 2 other Hu family servants and headed straight for the northern side of the capital. Riding at top speed, they arrived at the east side of Willow Town in less than 4 hours. Here, they were stopped by a group of Ming soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. In this team, there were 2 men in camouflage clothing who looked very energetic. "Who are you? Get off your horse and report your identity." Seeing that there were horses coming from the direction of the capital, the 2 men in camouflage clothing looked at each other and smiled. They had already stopped several groups like this. This was also Yang Chendong's intention. He wanted Zhu Qiyu to understand the cruelty of war and make him worried and afraid. If you wanted to make others afraid of you, it was not as simple as beating them up. Sometimes, raising a stick of pressure and not letting it fall would give people a feeling of intimidation. Seeing the Ming army blocking the road, Hu Zhongning, who was leading the group, knew that this should be the Ming army that was fighting against the Walla. He immediately let out a sigh of relief and reported his name. "This official is the Imperial Guardian of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, Hu Zhongning. Under the Emperor's orders, I have come to investigate the situation of the battle. You only need to report the truth." "What Imperial Guardian? I've never heard of him. Just tie him up as well." The 2 men in camouflage clothing chuckled. In front of them, the so-called Great Ming army did not have the slightest bit of deterrence. After laughing, they ordered the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office to tie up Hu Zhongning as usual. The Ming army seemed to be used to this kind of thing. They did not even blink as they walked toward Hu Zhongning and the other three. Although they were Ming soldiers, after witnessing the power of the Cold Guards, they had already submitted to them in their hearts. In addition, they were just carrying out orders. If something happened, they did not have to take any responsibility. There was no need for them to be courteous. They just held the ropes and strode forward. Wait, what are you doing? Do you know who we are? Seeing that the Ming army was about to tie up Hu Zhongning, Lieutenant Gao Shang, who was following by the side, shouted. At the same time, he pulled out the embroidered spring saber at his waist. When they saw Gao Shang pull out the steel saber, a glint of excitement flashed across the eyes of the two Cold Guards. They were afraid that the people who came would not resist. If that happened, they would not be able to use their skills. Now, someone actually wanted to play tricks. This was exactly what they wanted. The two Cold Guards held two pitch-black and cold 95 styles in their hands. One of them had already aimed his gun at the steel saber in Gao Shang's hand. He was confident that he could break the saber with one shot. This way, the other party would not be able to resist. Stop! Hu Zhongning had long heard of the power of the advanced firearms in the mercenaries' hands. He did not want to take the risk. He immediately shouted at Gao Shang to stop him from acting rashly. At the same time, he looked at the two Cold Guards and said, "Where is Yang Chendong? I am his father-in-law." When they heard someone call out the sixth young master's name, the two Cold Guards revealed a cold glint in their eyes. It was as if they were about to attack at any time. However, when they heard the next sentence, they were stunned. This person was actually the father-in-law of the sixth young master. If they really offended him, wouldn't they be severely punished later? At that moment, the two of them put down the 95 styles in their hands. One of them was still skeptical as he asked, "Are you really Marquis Yang's father-in-law?" Noticing the change in attitude of the two mercenaries, Hu Zhongning let out a long sigh and said proudly, "I'm the real deal. How about this? Call Yang Chendong over and we'll know if it's real or not." Please wait for a moment. We'll call the company commander over." The two Cold Guards did not dare to act rashly. However, they would not completely believe the other party's words either. They decided to call the company commander, Tang Shan, over and let him determine if it was real or not. Hu Zhongning and the other three did not move. They were surrounded by more than 10 Ming dynasty soldiers. One of the Cold Guards stayed behind and stared at the four of them cautiously. From the looks of it, he seemed to be ready to attack at any time. Not long after, Tang Shan, who was also wearing a camouflage uniform but had the insignia of a major, hurried over. Tao Jin, the commander, came with him. As for Commander Gao Li, he stayed behind and was in charge of watching the Walla cavalry in Willowtown to prevent them from making any strange movements. Tang Shan did not know Hu Zhongning. However, he knew that the sixth young master had married Hu Yan as his first wife. This time, he brought Tao Jin over so that he could identify the people. Tao Jin was one of the commanders of the 5 cities warden's office. Naturally, he was familiar with all the noble families in the capital. From afar, when he saw that the person who came was indeed Hu Zhongning, he hurriedly cupped his fist and said politely, "So it's Lord Hu. Please forgive me for not coming out to meet you." Since Tao Jin had said so, how could it be fake? Tang Shan immediately saluted politely and said, "This subordinate is the commander of the 3rd Company of Mercenaries. Greetings, Lord Hu." This company commander is too polite. Since the other party's attitude was so respectful, Hu Zhongning naturally greeted him with a smile. Then he asked, "Oh right, why don't I see the loyal Marquis? May I know where he is now?" "Lord Hu, young Marquis is not here. He is meeting with the Walla's leader, Yes Hen, at the front line. I don't know what business you have, but if you must meet with young Marquis, I will have to report it," Tang Shan said politely. He could ignore other people, but in front of Hu Zhongning, he could not put on any airs. Hearing that Yang Chendong was meeting with Yes Hen, Hu Zhongning was shocked and asked, "Meeting? Is there any danger?" "There shouldn't be any danger for now, but I don't know the specific situation." Tang Shan shook his head. It was true that Hu Zhongning was the father-in-law of the 6th young master, but he was not a member of the Yang family, so there was no need for him to explain. He did not know the specific situation of Yang Chendong, but when he thought of the strength of the mercenaries and Yang Chendong's ability to plan ahead, Hu Zhongning was not too worried. I see, but how is the situation now? The Emperor is waiting for my reply. I don't know the specific situation. But what I can tell Lord Hu is that the Walla's army has been blocked by us outside Willow Town. They will not threaten the safety of the capital. Tang Shan hesitated for a moment and gave a rough explanation. As for the specific situation, without the authorization of the sixth young master, he would not reveal it. Chapter 2:16. Although he didn't see Yang Qindong, Tang Shan's answer was enough for Hu Zhongning to go back and report on his mission. A satisfied smile finally appeared on his face. Hu Zhongning quickly returned from the capital. He brought back the information he had gathered from the front line and the scouts he had sent out. He also explained in Tang Shan's words that he had no choice but to detain the scouts to prevent anyone from leaking information about the battlefield. He asked for the Emperor's understanding. Zhu Qiyu was indeed a little angry about the scouts being detained. But when he thought about how he still had to rely on Yang Qindong for the front line, how could he take such a small matter to heart? Especially when he heard Hu Zhongning say that the Walla army had been successfully stopped and that the capital was no longer in danger, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief and laughed with joy. Not only Zhu Qiyu, but the other important officials were also very happy when they heard that the capital was no longer in danger. Now they just had to wait for Yang Qindong's triumphant return. At the front line, a large number of Ming captives were sent over. On the Ming army's side, Deputy Chief Yang Guang came forward with 5,000 cavalrymen and was responsible for escorting the captives back to the capital safely. When accepting the captives, Yang Qindong asked the crowd if there were any captives left in the Walla. After receiving the majority's answer that all the captives had been returned, Yang Qindong breathed a sigh of relief. The number of captives received this time was more than 75,000. Most of them were brave soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles. They were just scared out of their wits before, so they couldn't display their full strength on the battlefield. Yang Qindong could imagine that with these 75,000 captives, the safety of the capital would no longer be a problem. Zhu Qizhen could finally sleep without worry. He had successfully completed the important task of protecting the capital of the great Ming dynasty. As for whether these people would be used by Zhu Qiyu to deal with him in the future, Yang Qindong wasn't too worried. Firstly, he had the mercenaries in his hands, so he had to think carefully before making a move. Secondly, these people were all saved by him, so they would have a lot of resistance in their hearts to deal with him. Thirdly, Zhu Qizhen was still in Nanjing, so Dai Zong had to think carefully before making a move against him. With these 3 points, his safety shouldn't be a problem. After dealing with the captives, it was time to release the Walla army and let them leave. This was what worried Yes Hen the most. Previously, when he was controlled by someone, he had no choice but to do as Yang Qindong said. Now that the matter was done, would he keep his promise and let's release him and the tens of thousands of Walla cavalry? On this point, Yes Hen was a little worried. Everything was as Yang Qindong said before. If he really wanted to deal with the Walla, then he could directly take out a few more cannons from the warehouse. He didn't have to worry about not being able to defeat the Walla, but he didn't do so. He still knew the principle of putting away the bow after the birds are done. If he didn't leave a big enemy for Zhu Qiyu, then when he really wanted to deal with him, he would have no scruples. Therefore, when Yang Qindong released more than 20,000 captives from Willow Town and let them join Yes Hen, this person was so moved that he cried out. It was no wonder that he did this. The population of the Walla was not large, and there were even fewer young men who could fight. If all the captives were killed this time, then he would really become a commander without an army. He was afraid that when he returned to the grassland, he wouldn't be able to dominate the grassland, and it would be a miracle if he didn't get bullied by others. Seeing that more than 20,000 cavalry had safely retreated, when he looked at Yang Qindong, Yes Hen said in a very admiring tone, "Marquis of the Great Ming, you are a real man. You do what you say, which is admirable. If you are willing, the two of us can join forces. At that time, no one in the Great Ming will be our opponent. At that time, there will be gold, silver, treasures, and beautiful women for us to choose from. Isn't that better?" Yes Hen invited sincerely, and Yang Qindong's face showed a smile. "Leader Yes Hen, there is not only one Great Ming in the world. There are many countries and ethnic groups in places that we don't know about. Why do you only want to deal with the Great Ming?" Yang Qindong's answer made Yes Hen stunned. He didn't expect such an answer. He lowered his head, and after hesitating for a moment, he raised his head and said, "As you said, this world may be very big, but we can't even deal with the Great Ming. How can we talk about other grand plans?" "No, no, no." Yang Chendong stretched out his right index finger and made a shaking motion. "As the leader of the Walla, you must first have confidence in your captives. With them you can achieve something. As for why you can't take down the Great Ming, it is because your strength is too weak. There is an old saying in the Central Plains, and I will give it to you here. To forge iron, you must be strong. Without enough strength, you can't achieve anything just by relying on the other party's mistakes. To forge iron, you must be strong." Yes Hen thought about this sentence thoughtfully. Yes, that's right. Walla doesn't lack soldiers who are brave enough to risk their lives. Your living environment and conditions made your men very brave at a very young age. On the battlefield, they can gallop everywhere. But do you know why they still failed? Yang Chendong nodded and guided Yes Hen. Why did they fail? This question was also what Yes Hen wanted to ask. Because your own ability to produce blood is insufficient. If you rely on robbing, this kind of ethnic group is destined to not go far. Yang Chendong chuckled and continued, "You lack all kinds of resources. You are complacent when you get something, and your ambition is satisfied. Since you are satisfied, you are not far away from the days when you lose. This is why although the Walla army is brave and can do some earth-shattering things from time to time, it can't escape the fate of being destroyed and replaced by others. In the end, it is because you can't win the hearts of the people. The reason you can't win the hearts of the people is because the people are not rich. They follow you, but in the end, they can't even fill their stomachs. Who would really risk their lives? On the other hand, if the country is rich and the people are strong, it means that someone wants to deal with you. In order to ensure the fruits of their victory, they have no choice but to take out their weapons and fight with their lives. One is spontaneous, the other is forced. Tell me, which one is more effective? Rich and the people are strong? Yes Hen was shocked by Yang Chendong's words. It was not that he didn't think about some things here, but he didn't know how to do it. Now that Yang Chendong brought up this problem, he should have a solution. Yes Hen said excitedly. The Ming dynasty's loyal marquis, but I don't know if there is a way to solve this problem? Of course there is. That is to develop commerce. The grassland is only rich in livestock. The natural environment makes you have a great demand for many other things. If they could start a business, then not only could they be self-sufficient, they could also sell their surplus to other places and earn a profit from the difference in price. They could also trade with people from other regions for things they needed. In short, they could earn more money, and gradually, Tile would become stronger. Once you have money, you will be able to do a lot of things. At that time, it will be much easier for you to expand again. Whether it is money or cavalry, you will be in an invincible position. When Yang Chendong said this, he seemed to have seen some kind of result. His face was full of excitement. At that time, the Tatars will not be a stumbling block for your expansion. On the contrary, they will become your base, the base of talent reserves. When you need soldiers, you can use a lot of gold and silver to make them work for you. In the north of your country, there is a country called Tsarist Russia. I think you should more or less know about it. That country is vast and rich in resources. Its area is much larger than the Ming dynasty, but its population is very small. That is the place you need to conquer. Remember Genghis Khan? Don't you want to be like your ancestors? A majestic strategic map was placed in front of Yes Hen. After Yang Chendong said this, his heart was suddenly moved. It was like a person in the dark who saw the light, a person in a desperate situation who saw hope. It made Yes Hen feel like he was reborn. Can we really do this? When he returned to reality, Yes Hen said with some uncertainty, "Why can't we do it?" The reason why the Ming dynasty has such a vast land and the prosperity of the people is the result of trade. If this is the case, why can't the Walla do it? Yang Chendong did not answer directly. Instead, he asked Yes Hen a question in a rhetorical way. Yes Hen could not answer this question, but he could continue to ask questions. So, does the loyal Marquis want the Walla and the Ming dynasty to stop attacking each other and resume trade? No. Yang Chendong shook his head. It is to establish trade with Marquis. This time, I'll be the one providing you with the goods. It won't be as simple as before, where I'll set up a horse farm to exchange for the goods you need with the Central Plains people. Instead, you will use silver to buy the goods I provide at a low price. Finally, through your hands you will sell them at a high price. At that time, you will find that doing this will allow you to earn more silver. Then you will be able to buy more things and do more things. In the end, Yang Chendong revealed his purpose. At the end of the day, Yang Chendong wanted to sell his goods and earn more silver to develop himself. At the same time, he wanted to increase his reputation. If he were to do the business himself, the speed would be too slow and the risk would be too great. If he really sent the Lang Feng to protect him, he did not know how much manpower he would have to put in. This was not proportional to what he would gain. At least for now, there were not many Lang Feng, so he could not split himself up. Chapter 217. But if he could convince Yes Hen, then it would be different. The current Walla was equivalent to the king of the grassland, and very few people dared to provoke them. If they were the ones who transported the goods, perhaps some of the profits would be shared by the other party, but compared to what he earned, it was already a lot. With the help of Walla, he could sell things to the Eurasian continent, which was equivalent to stretching out his tentacles one step ahead. This would play a very positive role in conquering, ruling and occupying that place in the future. This was Yang Chendong's real goal. Yes Hen was indeed smart and cunning. But when facing Yang Chendong, these characteristics of his were useless. They were not on the same level at all. Whether it was thinking, knowledge or martial strength, they were all on a completely different level. How could he be Yang Chendong's opponent? At this time, Yes Hen not only did not know Yang Chendong's ultimate goal, but he was also attracted by the other party's idea of strengthening himself through trade. He was not short of money. This time, after defeating Ying Zong, he seized a lot of gold and silver, which completely had the foundation to trade with Yang Chendong. Now what he had to consider was whether the bold and loyal Marquis words could be trusted, and why did the other party take the initiative to help him? Did he want to see the emergence of a powerful neighbor? If he couldn't figure this out, Walla didn't dare to make any decisions. Why are you helping me? Yes Hen finally asked, which meant that he was seriously considering his own opinion. Yang Chendong was happy in his heart, but he didn't show the slightest expression on his face. On the contrary, he showed a seemingly very heavy expression and said, "Marquis is from the great Ming dynasty, and my relatives and friends are here. Marquis really doesn't want to see them get hurt. As long as Walla doesn't invade, a lot of people can live. So Marquis wants to find a way out for you, a way out that doesn't invade the great Ming dynasty and can develop yourself." Yes Hen couldn't help but nod his head when he heard such a high-sounding reason. Obviously, as a Walla, he did not want his people to be invaded by other countries. Of course, Marquis likes silver very much. With money, he could do more of the things he liked. Since trading with Walla can guarantee Marquis' interests, why not? Yang Chendong offered another reason while Yes Hen was still deep in thought. Compared to the first reason, the second reason was much more practical. It also made Yang Chendong look more like an ordinary person. Ha ha ha. Hearing that, he burst into laughter. Obviously, this second reason was more persuasive and moved him. Because of this, he chose to believe in Yang Chendong. His loud laughter set the tone for the trade between the two sides. Then, they each put forward some requirements and conditions. For example, Yeshen's requirement was that the things Yang Chendong provided must be easy to sell and practical. If it was flashy, they had the right to refuse. Also, they could choose not to attack the Great Ming Dynasty, but if the Great Ming Dynasty took the initiative to find trouble with them, then they could not blame him for fighting back. Yang Chendong naturally agreed to Yeshen's requirements. But at the same time, he also put forward his own requirements. For example, after the goods arrived, they had to pay immediately. They were not allowed to owe anything. This was the basic integrity of a businessman. Also, he did not allow anyone from Walla to have any ideas about his goods and caravan. Not only that, they also had the responsibility and obligation to ensure the safety of the caravan. If the goods were intercepted and the Walla could not give an explanation, then he would use the heavenly thunder again. At that time, it would not be as simple as exchanging captives. It could be imagined that under the irresistible heavenly thunder, it was unknown whether the Walla could survive. Each side put forward their own requirements, and in the end, the Economic Association came to a consensus. With this matter settled, Yes, Hen excitedly left. Yang Qindong also turned and returned to the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. More than 70,000 Great Ming captives had been rescued. This would allow many broken families to be reunited. And all of this was because of Yang Qindong. On the way back, news of this matter would spread, causing these people to thank the loyalty marquis from the bottom of their hearts. This great hero who had saved them from fire and water, their great benefactor. The capital of the Great Ming Dynasty. The 12 city gates were opened, and the news spread to the capital. When the common people learned that more than 70,000 of their loved ones had been rescued, the streets were packed with people. They wanted to see if the rumors were true. And they also wanted to find their loved ones in the crowd. The first to enter the city were the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office. A total of 5,000 people, all of them holding their heads high and puffing out their chests, appeared to be in high spirits. In the past, they had played the role of maintaining law and order in the city. Most of the time they were the thugs of some privileged classes and nobles, helping them bully the common people. It could be said that they were hated by the common people. But this time it was completely different. He was returning to the city as a hero. Naturally, the welcome he received was extremely sincere and warm. When they saw the people on both sides of the road sincerely welcoming them, the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office were also moved. They suddenly realized that being a good person was far better than being a thug for evil people. After the soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office entered the city, Yang Guang's 5,000 cavalry followed. In this battle, they did not fight a single battle with the Walla cavalry. They only used a single blade to obtain a complete victory. While obtaining military merits, each of them, like the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office, received some silver from the loyalty marquis. Ordinary soldiers received at least 10 taels of silver. The higher the official rank, the more they received. This kind of good job of obtaining both silver and merit made the 5,000 cavalry sincerely grateful to Yang Qindong. If not for the loyalty marquis, it was likely that they would not have been able to defend the capital and survive this time. After the 5,000 elite cavalry, it was the 75,000 Ming soldiers that entered the city. As soon as these people appeared, they were shocked. The scene became a little chaotic. There were too many people who saw their family members. Some saw their sons, some saw their husbands, and some saw their fathers. Immediately, there were waves of crying and shouting. Today was a day worth remembering for the capital. It was a day of triumphant return after winning the battle. It was also a day of joy and joy. Moreover, it was a day filled with cries of joy mixed with cries of joy. On the gate tower of the Imperial city, Daizong Zhu was standing there with the civil and military officials, watching the performance of the people in the city, watching the victorious army return to camp. There was a relaxed smile on everyone's face. Especially Daizong Zhu. Ever since he ascended the throne, Walla was like a sharp sword hanging over his head, as if it would fall and stab him at any time. Because of this, he could not sleep at night and could not eat. It was as if he was afraid that one day he would be defeated like his brother, Daizong Zhu. Now, Walla had retreated, and it was a very happy retreat. The battle report from the front said that they were retreating quickly. It was clear that they wanted to retreat to Walla's territory and did not want to be entangled with the Great Ming Empire anymore. Being able to retreat was already very difficult, let alone being able to retreat so cleanly. This was extremely rare. This also showed how powerful Yang Qindong was. There were also battle reports that this time, the Great Ming Empire sent out more than 10,000 people and returned with no casualties. On the contrary, Walla's army suffered heavy losses. Even their leader, Yeshen's younger brother, Bai Luomao, was killed on the battlefield. To be able to obtain such a great victory with almost no losses, this loyalty marquis must be a very formidable commander. While Zhu Qiyu was sighing at Yang Qindong's godlike leadership, he was also thinking about how to reward him. He won the battle, solved the threat in the capital, saved more than 70,000 captives, and brought peace to the Great Ming Empire. If he did not reward him for all these things, it was obviously impossible. The officials would not agree, the army would not agree, and the people would not agree. But what should he reward him for? After all, Yang Qindong was not even 20 years old, but he was already the loyal marquis of the Great Ming Empire. This had not happened even when the Great Ming Empire was founded. If he was rewarded, his official position would be too high. Would his achievements be greater than that of the town lord? Zhu Qiu's throne could not be said to be completely stable. He could not be looking for a powerful imaginary enemy for himself, right? Your Majesty, the Minister of War, Yi Ming, the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, have memorials. Just as Zhu Qiu was thinking about Yang Chendong, head eunuch Jining placed a memorial in front of him. What is this? Zhu Qiu asked casually. He reached out to take the memorial and opened it. As soon as he read it, his eyes lit up and he nodded repeatedly. It was really like a pillow being sent to him when he was sleepy. This was a memorial that the officials had recommended to reward the loyal marquis. It said that Yang Chendong can be rewarded with the title of loyal marquis. His fief will be 5,000 mu of grain fields around the Yang family's old residence in Jianghu Prefecture. This was a diversion of disaster. The so-called loyal marquis was nothing more than a title that represented his high rank. But that was it. Just like Duke Ing Zhongfu in the past, even though he was an official, he was still bullied and humiliated by eunuchs without daring to speak up. But no matter what, after being bestowed the title of duke, it would represent the emperor's regard for Yang Chendong. Presumably, this would be able to shut the mouths of the people in the world. As for the fief, it would be given to Jianghu Prefecture. That place could now be considered Zhu Qiu's territory. Intentionally luring Yang Chendong, there was indeed the intention of getting rid of the donkey after it had outlived its usefulness. But how could it not be a diversion of disaster? For this reason, Zhu Qiu would probably be hopping mad. Chapter 218. It could be said that this memorial was very much in line with Zhu Qiu's thoughts. He immediately approved the memorial. Using the red pen that Jining had prepared, he approved it and the matter was settled. It was worth mentioning that Zhu Qiu had originally wanted to announce the edict in front of all the officials. However, Yang Chendong did not appear after winning the battle. Perhaps he wanted to keep a low profile. However, no one knew that he did not want to see Zhu Qiu. Otherwise, he would have to kneel and kowtow. With his current strength, there was no need for him to be so humble. Yang Chendong did not come to see the emperor. The imperial edict had to be announced by someone else. It just so happened that Jining had some matters to discuss with him. She accepted the task and brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and young eunuchs to Yang Manor. The battle was over. Yang Chendong's goal had been achieved. Because of this, they were fortunate enough to follow the sixth young master to Yang Manor. By the time Jining arrived, everyone was having a meal. When Yang Si, who was in charge of guarding, saw that it was Jining and the others, he quickly reported the situation to Yang Chendong. They're here so quickly. Yang Chendong, who was drinking wine and eating meat with Lung Feng and the others, chuckled. He casually waved his hand and said, "Then why don't we invite them here to announce the edict?" Here. A trace of worry flashed through Yang Si's eyes. Like a shadow, Tiger Mane, who followed beside Yang Chendong, knew what Yang Si was worried about. It was none other than Lung Feng. If they saw that their sixth young master had to kneel to someone else, it was inevitable that they would not be able to accept it and cause trouble. In fact, how could he not have such worries? However, since this was the sixth young master's intention, there was no room for doubt. He immediately glared at Yang Si and said, "If the young master tells you to go, then go. Why are you being so long-winded?" Yes. Yang Si saw that Tiger's Mane was angry. It was said that they were usually under this person's management. After a trace of panic appeared on his face, he agreed and left. Yang Chendong patted Tiger's Man's shoulder and gave him a look of approval and relief. Then, he continued to drink with Lung Feng, Xiao Feng, Teng Shan, Wu Shang, and the other company commanders as if he hadn't heard anything. Not long after, Jining arrived. Along with him were 4 eunuchs and 8 masters of the embroidered uniform guards. Usually, when a eunuch went to an official's house to deliver an edict, as the recipient of the edict, they had to prepare an incense table in advance in order to show their seriousness. Some even had to burn incense and bathe in the ceremony. But today, there was nothing prepared. Yang Chendong was still wearing his casual and elegant green robes. He didn't wear his official robes, and the incense table wasn't set up. When Jining saw this, she couldn't help but frown. But it was only a slight frown, and she quickly relaxed. It wasn't for any other reason than the fact that the Yang family's square was filled with mercenary soldiers in camouflage uniforms. Although there were only 400 of them, their combat power was unimaginable. Even defeating Walla had been done with the help of their powerful strength. Against such people, Jining had no chance of winning at all. It wasn't just him. Even the 8 masters of the embroidered uniform guards that he'd brought with him were on full alert. It wasn't that they were dissatisfied with Yang Chendong's lack of preparation before receiving the edict, but they were worried that these mercenaries would suddenly go on a rampage and hurt them. "Oh, it's Eunuch Jean. Come, have a drink with Marquis and the other meritorious officials." As soon as Jining appeared, Yang Chendong secretly observed her reaction. He found that she was indeed a little displeased, but she quickly suppressed her displeasure. Yang Chendong smiled inwardly. He wanted to use this method to remind him that he wasn't an ordinary marquis. There were some rules that couldn't be applied to him. If something went wrong and he went on a rampage, everyone's face would be ruined. Yang Chendong greeted Jining as if he were drunk. Jining couldn't help but look a little embarrassed. He wanted to scold Yang Chendong for not following the rules, but he didn't dare do so in front of all the mercenaries. He could only comfort himself. They had just won a great battle, so it was only right that they celebrate together. There was no need to argue with someone who was drunk. "Loyal Marquise, the Emperor has an edict for you. Please kneel and receive it," Jining said with a fake smile. He didn't directly respond to Yang Chendong's invitation to drink. Subconsciously, he seemed to be saying, "We aren't on the same side, so there's no need for us to drink together." There's another Imperial decree, but His Majesty is going to reward this Marquis again. Ha ha. Since he was drunk, it was not a problem for him to act a little wild. He immediately laughed and stood up. Perhaps it was because he had drunk too much, but when he stood up, he almost lost his balance. If not for Hu Mang, who was standing at the side, who was prepared and supported him, he would have fallen to the ground in an embarrassing manner. "I, Yang Chendong, accept the edict." Yang Chendong shrugged his shoulders and shook off Hu Mang's arm that was on his body. With a plop, he fell to the ground, giving people the feeling that he was prostrating himself on the ground. Because of Jin Ying's appearance, all the mercenaries in the courtyard had stopped drinking and eating. The atmosphere had become much colder. But now, Yang Chendong had suddenly fallen to the ground and knelt to receive the edict. All the mercenaries stared coldly at Jining and the other mercenaries. 10,000 swords piercing the heart was nothing more than this. At this moment, Jining felt cold all over. It was as if he was walking in the snow without wearing anything. No, it was colder than that. It was a coldness that seeped into his bones. Jining couldn't imagine why these mercenaries gave him such a terrifying feeling. Even as he panicked, he opened the Golden Dragon Edict with trembling hands. He read out the edict of acting Patriarch Zhu Qizhen rewarding Yang Chendong with the title of Duke of Loyalty. This was a rare moment when he was absent-minded while reading an edict. But at this moment, Jining was really afraid. When he read the edict, he stuttered. He finally finished reading the edict. But when he looked at Yang Chendong, his lips were slanted and he was snoring softly. It seemed that he had fallen asleep. Jining didn't dare to be angry. Instead, he leaned forward with a gentle expression and said softly, "Duke of Loyalty, wake up. Wake up. Ah, I've finished reading the edict. Thank you, Your Majesty." Yang Chendong seemed to have been startled awake. He opened his eyes and spoke. Then he rubbed his eyes and said to Jining, "You've worked hard, Eunuch Jean. How about this? Please enter the hall and rest for a while. After Marquis has bathed, we can sit down together." Jining had come here to have a good chat with Yang Chendong. Of course, he wouldn't refuse this opportunity. But he was very worried about whether Yang Chendong's mind was still clear. But no matter what, he had to agree. He noticed from the corner of his eye that the 400 mercenaries had already stood up and were looking at him with hostility. He couldn't guarantee that if he continued to stay here, he wouldn't be torn apart and eaten alive by these mercenaries. For his own safety, of course, entering the Yang family manor was the best choice. Okay. Since Duke of Loyalty is so kind, it would be impolite for me to refuse." With that, Jining followed Beta Persei into the outer courtyard of the Yang family manor. Yang Chendong left with them. But he was heading towards the inner courtyard of the inner courtyard. He really did bathe and change his clothes. Just as Yang Chendong, Jin Ing, and the others left, someone among the 400 mercenaries shouted, "How can we allow others to blaspheme the sixth young master? We're going to seek justice from Emperor Ming." That's right. We want justice. In an instant, the anger in the hearts of many mercenaries was ignited. In their eyes, the sixth young master was a godlike existence. How could he kneel to others? When such a blasphemous thing happened, it naturally caused the crowd to be furious. It wasn't just the 400 mercenaries. Even Lang Song, Xiao Feng, and the other battalion commanders were furious. They looked like they would explode at any moment and cause trouble for Emperor Ming. Enough! Everyone, sit down. A loud roar came from Hu Mang's mouth. This time, he didn't leave with Yang Chendong. He had stayed behind to stabilize the situation. Even though the two of them hadn't communicated before. But after interacting with each other for so long, they already had a tacit understanding. When Yang Chendong left just now, he had given him an inconspicuous look, which made Tiger's Man understand what to do next. With Tiger's Man's shout, all the mercenaries' gazes fell on him. But when they saw Chief Tiger's body tremble, the anger in their hearts seemed to have been extinguished. But because they were angry, they didn't sit down immediately. What? If you don't listen to me, that means you don't listen to the sixth young master. Don't tell me you want to leave Cold Edge? Very well, if anyone wants to do that, step forward. I can do as you wish right now. Seeing that none of the mercenaries, including Lang Song and the other battalion commanders, sat down, Tiger's Man's eyes narrowed into slits. His anger was obvious. When they heard that they were going to be kicked out of Cold Edge, everyone's morale instantly dropped. Ever since they joined Cold Edge, there was a saying that followed them. Once in Cold Edge, always in Cold Edge. This was an honorable title that no one else had the right to take away. Unless they had committed a grave mistake, they wouldn't be kicked out of the meeting. But this someone else did not include the founder of Cold Edge, Yang Chendong, or the former head instructor, the current chief of the security bureau, Tiger's Man. Everyone who joined Cold Edge knew of the sixth young master, Yang Chendong. Similarly, there weren't many who didn't know of Chief Tiger's Man. It could be said that in the entire Xianxia new army, if Yang Chendong was the Nan Bowen, then the second place would definitely be Tiger's Man. This position was hard to replace, no matter how many contributions others made. For example, the only army commander, Lang Song, would feel inferior when he saw Tiger's Man. Chapter 219. Now, Hu Mang had spoken, and he was speaking with Lung Feng's qualifications and identity. How could the others dare to disagree? They immediately returned to their original stools with a rustling sound. Everyone quieted down, and Tiger's Mane's eyes revealed a satisfied expression. I know that you are very dissatisfied with Ming Emperor's actions towards the sixth young master. But please remember, why did the sixth young master do this? Isn't it to create more time for you to develop? Everyone was originally from the great Ming dynasty. To you, many of your relatives and friends live on this land. If the sixth young master did not compromise and chose to go to war with the Ming army, who knows how many innocent souls would have been implicated and died? Among them might have been your relatives and friends. If that was the case, is this an outcome that you want to see? Tiger's Mane asked the crowd in a powerful and resonant voice. Of course not. I think that no one wants to see their own people fight against their own people. In order to give us more time to develop, and in order to let more of the great Ming dynasty's people and Han descendants suffer less from the chaos of war, the sixth young master has been dealing with the Ming emperor in the capital. This is an act of sacrificing one's own family for the sake of everyone. I hope that everyone can understand. I also hope that today's matter will serve as a warning to all of you and give you a sense of urgency. If we can strengthen our strength earlier, then the sixth young master can avoid this punishment. Do you understand? Yes. Another uniform sound rang out, causing the ground of the entire courtyard to tremble. Very good. Now let's continue eating. Tiger's Mane saw that he did not disappoint the sixth young master, and spoke of the sixth young master's good intentions. He could not help but inwardly sigh in relief, and then threw a glance at Commander Lang Song. Lang Song immediately expressed his understanding. With his cooperation with the 3 battalion commanders, the atmosphere in the courtyard became lively again. However, although everyone did not say anything else, They all felt a surge of energy in their hearts. That was to perform better so that the sixth young master could have the right to speak to Emperor Ming as an equal. In the side hall of the outer residence of the Yang family manor, Jining had just sat down when a loud roar came from outside the door, giving her a fright. Originally nervous, he immediately stood up. From the looks of it, he was ready to run away at any moment. On the other hand, Beta Persei, who was in charge of leading the way, did not panic at all when he heard the shouts outside. When he saw how nervous Jining was, he said nonchalantly, "It's fine. It's just a ritual for mercenaries to eat. You won't find it strange after hearing it so many times." Beta Persei's explanation made Jining's body slowly relax. So that's how it is. This is really a strange rule. Ha ha ha, what kind of strange behavior is this? Yang Qindong, who had changed into a new green robe, strode in from the main entrance. At that moment, he didn't look drunk at all. Instead, he looked extremely spirited and sober. However, at this moment, Jining did not care so much. Since the decree had been announced, was there a need to hold on to the past and not let it go? Seeing Yang Qindong walk over, Jining laughed and stood up. "Congratulations, Duke of Loyalty. Haha, in the future, I can also call myself Duke of Loyalty, right?" Yang Qindong laughed heartily as he walked to the main seat in the side hall and sat down. When he sat down, he pointed to the first seat on the left and said to Jining, "Eunuch Jin, you don't have to be so polite. Take a seat too." This action immediately caused Jining's displeasure. Although he was only a eunuch, he was the head eunuch. However, he was the head of the eunuchs, the favorite of the emperor, and held great power in his hands. Usually, when he was with the other important officials, he would always be the first to sit before the others. At the very least, everyone had to be seated at the same time. This order of seating was not to be underestimated. It often represented the level of one's status. This was very particular. However, at this moment, Yang Qindong actually sat down first before allowing Jining to sit down. He did not even say a word of invitation. The dominance of the landlord was as clear as day. Jining was extremely displeased and looked around. When he noticed that there were only Yang Qindong and Beta Persei in the room, he thought that it would not be a loss of face if no one else saw him. Thus, he suppressed the anger in his heart and slowly sat down. Yang Qindong had deliberately neglected Jining in order to suppress the other party's power. Now, it seemed that everything was going smoothly. With a certain amount of authority, Yang Qindong began to negotiate with Jining. Although it was called a negotiation, it was actually a fight for benefits. According to his original plan, Yang Qindong proposed 3 conditions. First, the Yang family bank would officially open for business. After the capital, it would be promoted to the other major cities nearby. The Imperial court would not be able to stop him, nor would it play any dirty tricks. In short, in the future, Yang Qindong would be a businessman, and a great one at that. If no one provoked him, he would not use his power to oppress others. Second, for his own personal safety. Of the 400 mercenaries, 200 would be left behind. 100 would be in the Yang family village and 100 would be in the capital to ensure the safety of the immortal abode, heaven beyond heaven, and the Yang family bank. In the future, he would decide according to the situation whether or not to continue hiring mercenaries. On this point, Yang Qindong showed that he was rich and imposing. Third, Yang Qindong would not attend court, nor would he participate in court politics. He would also not participate in the matters between Dai Zong and Ing Zong. He wanted to become a third party with a transcendent status. As for these 3 conditions, Dai Zong had already agreed to the first condition, and had even said that he would deposit 500,000 taels of silver into the Yang family bank. There was no need to discuss it further. Jining agreed immediately. As for the second condition, he could not doubt it either. The other party had money and could hire mercenaries, which could only make others envious. It was on the third condition that Jining was dissatisfied with. She made a request on behalf of Dai Zong. That was, since he was the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he should be on the side of Dai Zong. "I saved Ing Zong's life. It is impossible for me to completely cut off my relationship with him. Dai Zong has also treated me well. It is already not easy for him to not help either side. There is no need to say anything else." Yang Chendong shook his head and spoke with a resolute attitude. Jining could see that Yang Chendong had no intention of backing down on these 3 conditions. After hesitating for a moment, she thought about how Walla had already retreated and did not need Yang Chendong to act for the time being. Since that was the case, not helping either side was not a bad choice. There was no harm in agreeing. But if she agreed, Jining also raised 3 conditions. First, they would not help either side. Yang Chendong was only the Duke of Loyalty and had no other authority. Even his previous position as the commander of the embroidered uniform guards had to be removed. Since he was going to retire, he might as well retire completely. Second, Yang Chendong was not allowed to interfere with Dai Zong's relationship with the mercenaries. Jining was very clear on this issue. He even said that he already knew that the Duke of Loyalty and the leader of the mercenaries had a good relationship. Jining thought that after she said all this, Yang Chendong would at least look embarrassed and would even give an explanation. Unexpectedly, young Master Yang had no intention of speaking at all. Instead, he continued. Let's talk about the 3rd condition. The reason Yang Chendong did not care so much was naturally because he had purposely revealed everything that Jining knew. Based on the fact that he had a good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was clear that Jining was ignorant. In reality, it was not just a good relationship. They were the same person. All right, the 3rd condition is that since you are a merchant, you have to pay business taxes. This is also a matter of course. Of course, the Great Ming Army and embroidered uniform guards who have received the money will also protect the Yang family's business. Jin Ying's face was full of smiles. She seemed to be saying that if you pay taxes, you will naturally be protected. If you don't pay taxes, then sorry, but don't come looking for us when someone causes trouble. Yang Chendong had already considered the matter of paying taxes. He had even thought of a countermeasure. However, since Jining had brought it up, he still had to fight for the rights and benefits. Oh, then how does eunuch Jin intend to collect the taxes? The Great Ming's laws require that agriculture be taxed at a 30:1 ratio, Jining said in a probing tone. This was the result of a discussion with the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, the Minister of War, Yi Ming, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu. The 3 ministers all agreed that if they wanted to curb Yang Chendong's development, they had to collect business taxes. In this way, not only could they obtain a large amount of money to fill the national treasury, but they could also hinder Yang Chendong's development. In the Grand Great Ming, there was actually someone who could earn money faster than the country. If they didn't use any methods to restrain him, it would be incredible. That's impossible. Yang Chendong shook his head straightforwardly. I will not accept a 30:1 ratio. Yang Chendong's reply was so straightforward that it immediately checkmated Jin Ying. His face was first filled with anger, angry that Yang Chendong's attitude was so resolute. But when he thought of the benefits that could be obtained from this matter, he immediately said, Fine, then I don't know what the Duke of Zhongdon's opinion is. How much business tax should be collected? Yang Chendong appeared to be deep in thought as he said, although the laws of the Great Ming don't stipulate it, in reality, the rich and powerful don't have to pay taxes when they do business. It's just like how scholars don't have to pay taxes when they farm. Right now, you want to collect business tax from me. No matter how much you pay, it's not appropriate, right? How could Jining not understand the logic behind this? However, who told other people to do business and farm to support their families, but Yang Chendong was using this to develop his power? For example, the mercenaries he had hired were 200 people. According to the standard rate, it would cost 2 million taels to hire them. Looking at the entire Great Ming, there was probably no one else other than Yang Chendong who could take out this amount of money so easily. Even the Imperial family would feel heartache if they took out this amount of money. Chapter 220. Since he had made his business so big, what was the big deal about collecting a little tax? It's not the same, Jining said, aggrieved. How is it different? Yang Chendong didn't seem to notice Jin Ying's aggrieved expression. Instead, he fiercely retorted, Could it be that because this guild is making money, you want to collect taxes from me? Could it be that because I did so much to protect the capital, you want to collect taxes from me? If that's the case, there's no way you can justify it, right? Then I, Yang Bao, have no choice but to ask the people of the world, where is justice? Where was Yang Bao's justice? Jin Ying's entire body trembled, his expression ugly. Only now did he realize that Wang Zhan still had a powerful tool in his hands. Normally, even if the emperor's decree was announced to the world, it would still take time for the common people to learn of it. But Yang Bao was different. Wherever it appeared, the things recorded in it would quickly become known to all. He had even heard that in some places, when the local government had some rules, they would even use Yang Bao to spread the news. From this, one could see just how great his influence was. At this moment, Ji Ning was inwardly cursing Wang Zhan for being a pig. How could he have made Yang Bao legal back then? Now, the drawbacks had appeared. Alas, Wang Zhan was already a dead man. Cursing him now had no effect. It was better to think about how to resolve the matter at hand. In any case, he couldn't allow Yang Chendong to speak of the grievances and unfair treatment he had suffered. Otherwise, it would be a major blow to Dai Zong's image. Duke of loyalty and courage? Then what do you think should be done? This duke doesn't ask for anything else. You can deal with the business tax as you see fit. Even if it's 20 to 10, 10 to 1, Marquis will accept it. After all, this is for the sake of the country. But there is one condition that must be fair, and that is that this duke's business must be taxed, as well as other merchants and nobles. Otherwise, don't blame me for falling out with you. Yang Chendong kept saying that he was willing to pay an enormous price for the sake of the country. But his last request left Ji Ning in a difficult spot. Yang Chendong was asking for fairness, and there was nothing wrong with this. However, if he really did that, he would offend countless influential people. In the past, when Ing Zong was here, he only said that he wanted to collect taxes, but he never carried it out. What's wrong? Now that you've taken the throne and won the battle to defend the capital, you want to make an example out of the nobles and merchants? Isn't this a little too quick to get rid of the donkey the moment it outlived its usefulness? He thought that if he really took 30 to 1, he would lose the support of the people very quickly. Who knows how many people would go to Nanjing to seek refuge with Ing Zong? This was not an outcome he wanted to see. However, they had no choice but to collect taxes. Originally, a country was divided into two, so the taxes would naturally be reduced by half. If they didn't think of other ways, once there was an emergency, it would be hard to say if there would be enough money to deal with it. Since they had to collect taxes, they could only think of a way based on the ratio. Ji Ning had originally believed that he could use this to suppress Yang Chendong, but who would have expected that he would end up shooting himself in the foot? He could only reply with an unsightly expression. Fine, we'll do as the Duke of Loyalty says. Everyone who does business must pay taxes, whether they're merchants or nobles. As for the tax rate, why don't we set it at 100 to 1? 100 to 1. This was indeed a very low rate. This was also because the resumption of the business tax required a buffer. But in reality, this was not a very low rate for merchants. Merchants valued profit, and this sort of action of plundering them would most assuredly arouse the opposition of many. But at this moment, Ji Ning did not have the time to consider such things. He only knew that if he did not reach an agreement with Yang Chendong, it would be even more difficult to raise the issue of collecting taxes in the future. Well said, well said. We'll do as Eunuch Jin says. As long as the other merchants pay the same taxes, I have no objections. Yang Chendong regained his smile, giving off the impression that he was very magnanimous. But Ji Ning knew very well that this was just for show. This was because once the matter became related to all the merchants in the world, it would be impossible to raise the taxes even if they wanted to. Ji Ning finally left, looking a little disheveled as he left. Although Yang Chendong was not even 20 years old, he gave Ji Ning the impression that he was a little fox. It was as if this person knew how to read and already knew what he was going to say. He had already prepared countless countermeasures. He was really worried that if he continued to stay here, he would accidentally fall into the other party's trap and would have to pay a certain price. Fortunately, the trip to Xianxia village was not completely fruitless. Putting aside the agreement he had reached with Yang Chendong, when he left the village, Ji Ning saw Lang Song, the leader of the mercenaries, waiting by the roadside. When he saw Lang Song standing by the roadside in his camouflage uniform, Ji Ning hurriedly stopped the sedan and welcomed him with a joyful expression. Oh, it's Leader Lang. I didn't know you were waiting here. I've kept you waiting. It's fine. Lang Song said expressionlessly. I've been waiting here for Eunuch Jin to fulfill my promise with you. Now that the war is over, When will the 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron that Emperor Ming promised be delivered? I've already prepared the advanced firearms that you requested. When he heard that the advanced firearms were already prepared, Jianying's face lit up with joy. Well said, well said. The 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron have already been prepared. But how will we transport them out? That's simple. You can use the Yang family's commercial transportation system to transport them out. I've already discussed this with the Duke of Loyalty, Lang Song said. Hearing that this had already been arranged, Jianing nodded in agreement. All right, then I'll hand them over to the Duke of Loyalty. Oh right, when will we be able to obtain the advanced firearms that Leader Lang mentioned? Knowing that this was what Jianing was concerned about, Lang Song said without hesitation, when the copper and iron are transported out of the capital, it will be time to hand over the advanced firearms. Oh right, there's one more thing that needs to be discussed with Eunuch Jean. This time, we've repelled the Walla's army, but we've also communicated with them. We'll be doing business with the Walla, and have handed this matter over to the Duke of Loyalty. We'll have to trouble Eunuch Jean to take care of this matter. Of course, once this matter is settled, if Eunuch Jean has any personal requests in the future, I'll put in a good word for you in front of our leader. Lang Song said this expressionlessly, but it was rather grating to Jian Ying's ears. Leader Lang, you're doing this for this eunuch's sake. The Walla just had a fierce battle with our great Ming. It doesn't seem right for us to be doing business with them now, does it? Of course it doesn't. That's why it's us mercenaries doing business with the Walla. It has nothing to do with your great Ming. We're just borrowing your path. What's wrong? Does Eunuch Jean have a problem with this? At the end of his speech, Lang Song's face became very serious, as if he was very angry. No, of course there's no problem with this eunuch here. It's just that this matter is too big. This eunuch still needs to report this matter to His Majesty, and let His Majesty make a decision. Jianing wasn't foolish enough to offend the mercenaries, so she brought up Dai Zong's name. It's fine. This leader will still stay in the capital with my brothers for a few days, so we can listen to what your Ming Emperor has to say. But if Ming Emperor doesn't give us a satisfactory answer by the time we leave, then I'm sorry. But I can't guarantee that we won't accept the mission when someone else pays us money to deal with the great Ming. How could Lang Song not see that Jianing was delaying? Since that was the case, he took the initiative to propose a deadline. Jianing could tell that there was another meaning behind his words. Leader Lang, you mean that the mercenaries won't attack our great Ming? It's not that they won't attack, but that Ming Emperor has agreed to our conditions, so he will naturally take care of his business partners. Unless someone is willing to pay several times the price to deal with you, we won't accept the mission. Lang Song nodded and then shook his head. In short, he had thrown out the benefits, but he didn't say that he was dead set. Good. If that's the case, Ming Emperor should be able to agree. Jianing heard another meaning in his words. She had long heard of the high cost of hiring mercenaries. If it was several times the price, there probably weren't many people who could afford it. With these conditions, it shouldn't be difficult to convince Zhu Qiyu. Your Ming Emperor should have agreed. Once Walla does business with us, their focus might shift. At that time, I'm afraid they won't have any designs on the great Ming. Lang Song nodded as if he was giving her advice. Yes. Jianing nodded, then looked left and right. When she saw that there was no one around, she carefully moved in front of Lang Song and asked, Leader Lang, since Walla can work with your army, can we work together? Lang Song looked at Jianing alertly. Eunuch Jean, I've said before that the Duke of Loyalty and our leader have a very good relationship. You shouldn't have such ideas. Even so, it's best that you don't say such things in the future. Otherwise, if you cause any trouble, even I won't be able to bear it. All right, I'll take my leave now. Lang Song left, leaving Jianing standing there alone. Her expression changed again and again. She had previously thought that Yang Qindong's relationship with the leader of the mercenaries was not bad. However, from the probing just now, it seemed that their relationship was far better than she had imagined. It seemed that it was best not to offend this Duke of Loyalty in the future. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.